not been involved in a board meeting before, we provide 45 minutes at the beginning of our meeting for individuals or groups to talk to us about all board matters, including any of the resolutions or actions that are on the board meetings today. We don't usually have a sign-up sheet, but what we have is that you've heard our webmaster talking about how to make your presence known to indicate you want to provide testimony. I'm going to ask that you please limit your testimony to 3 minutes if you can. And if you can't do it, I'll let you know when the 3 minutes are up, and I ask you to wrap up your testimony. And I would also point out that you can provide us any written testimony at any time by submitting it, and we have links on our website at TriMet.org that you can, under our board portions, that you can submit any testimony to us. So with that, I'm going to open the public forum up and ask that Jeff check and see who's interested in providing that, and I'll let him pick the people in the order they've actually indicated they want to speak. So Jeff, can you do that?
Yes, the first person that indicated they want to speak is Quatemoc, and I'm going to unmute them now.
Thank you.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can't hear you. If you'd give us your name, please.
Yeah, my name's Quatemoc Mikolaskis. For the record, I'm with Bus Riders Unite, and I honestly didn't even have anything written. Just out of experience, there has been little to nothing done about any testimony I've given to TriMet. But I do want to speak on this most distaste of how our voice has been treated in the TriMet space, like at TIAC, at this new safety public committee table we've been effectively banned from. We just feel really left out, and that our voice doesn't matter to TriMet when they are kind of, it feels that they're kind of painting this narrative for their own benefit in the culture at TriMet, that they're looking for folks who are pro-police and pro fair enforcing, and we see the opposite. I'm with BRU. I am friends with countless transit riders, transit advocates, and everyone is screaming for defunding and de-investing of police and fair enforcement, and replacing that with rider advocates who are unarmed, trained to be experts in de-escalation. Recent police sweeps of riders were deemed unconstitutional, and that's not okay. And I want to see that happen. I want to see accountability happen, and it's your job as the board to make that happen. It's your job to make sure that there isn't some exclusive table that TriMet has handpicked who they want to be there. And I'm not seeing that from y'all, and I really want to see that, or I just will lose faith in our transit agency altogether. I already have, honestly, but you're the last. I just feel like you guys right here are the last chance, last hope we have in making sure that our transit actually works for people. Some other points I want to touch on is there's a lack of ridership and youth representation. Just in general, rider and youth representation at these meetings and committees. Another thing is we haven't had a commitment to no fare hikes, and that's really important, especially in a pandemic where folks' incomes are being affected in a negative sense and limited. So really what I'm asking for is a sweeping change in the processes and accountability processes at TriMet, and the way the board has been engaged with TriMet and actually holding them accountable, because I'm not seeing it. No one I know is seeing it, and we're all really just upset, and we really want to see change, or we will have no faith, and we want to have our faith restored in TriMet, and I want to see that happen. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, and I think I speak on behalf of the board that we definitely want your input in our process and value it. We also understand your position. We also understand there may be conflicting or various other opinions out in the community, and I think our staff has developed a good process to allow us to get that input. So I would say stay engaged. We want your input, and we're looking forward to a very thorough and inclusive discussion in terms of safety, security, and equity at TriMet. So with that, unless any other board member has any comment, I'm going to ask Jeff to get the next member.
Yes, Bruce, if I could. Could you please, and I want to pronounce your name correctly, Qualdemock? Anyway,
yeah.
I apologize if I mispronounce your name, but would you please submit written testimony as well?
Yes, I'll have something written up later.
And thank you. I just wanted to piggyback on that. You know, I feel like, I mean, the board's role is really to listen, and I think these public comments are sort of that 3-minute chance, right, to listen to community members. But what I'm hearing you say is there's maybe some specific concerns that you may have. So I agree. I think providing, I think what would be helpful for me is to have maybe some specific, you know, experiences that you may have with being involved with either TIAC or the Safety and Security Committee would be really great. Thank you so much again for coming to the board with your concerns. But if possible, if you can provide a little bit more specifics, I think that would be great. And then that way we can, you know, try to direct some of those concerns to staff or problem solve it in some other ways.
I include that in the written testimony. Would that be sufficient, or is there another channel I should put that through?
The written will be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. You want to go down to our next requester?
Yes, the next person is Jesse Joseph, and I'm unmuting him now.
Can you hear me?
Can.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm testifying with BRU in support of bringing back the Rider Advocates program. And the way that I think about it is like, it feels like a standard like joke on TV at this point where like somebody, you know, some kind of incident happens and then people call the police and then they show up 2 hours later and they tell the person to like fill out a report and then they leave. And I feel like that's how we're trained to think about like what safety is and what like safety officers do. And that's basically how transit cops work in my view, right? Like you have these roaming bands of transit cops who make 6 figures and you got to pay them for equipment and you got to buy the SUVs they drive around in. And then they show up after an incident has already happened, and then generally they escalate the situation. And I don't really see that as an effective safety measure, especially when compared to like a well-trained rider advocate program who are actually riding with passengers, right? The amount that you're spending on these really expensive cops and their equipment and their, you know, everything, you could employ way more rider advocates who are actually on the vehicles and, you know, responding to things as they happen. And they can see what's happening and they're trained in de-escalation so that, you know, since they can see what's happening, they're better able to like respond to the situation. And I don't see, you know, the way that the transit cops work right now as being able to do that in any way at all. So I think the rider advocate program is a much more effective way, even from the or just in general, like it's a more effective way to keep people safe on transit.
Thank you. Were you finished?
Yes, thanks.
Okay. And I will point out again that the transit advocates are definitely something that are being considered and discussed as part of the reimagining of our safety, security, and equity. So again, hopefully you'll stay tuned there as I suggested to the other member too. But if you have any other further suggestions, please send them in to us. Thank you. Jeff?
All right, next person is Heather Moline. Heather, I'm unmuting you now.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Heather Moline. I've been a Bus Riders Unite member for about a year since my father became transit dependent after traumatic brain injury. And then I, shortly after, started undergoing screening for a bunch of autoimmune disorders that might leave me with the inability to drive. So very suddenly and very quickly, transit access has become very personal, has become thought of as a human right in my head. I also used to help run St. Francis Dining Hall near Southeast 11th and Stark. It's the last day center for people experiencing homelessness in the inner east side of Portland. When I worked there, the most frequent ask was for transit tickets to go to appointments with social workers because people just can't afford to get on the bus otherwise. And the biggest fear was definitely of police. And when someone called the police on someone, I saw the same cycle over and over again, which is like this. So the police show up and they very politely have their hands holstered on their guns. They talk to the person, not asking much about their needs, not being able to meet their needs because they're not trained to meet those needs. The person might get taken into the station, might get written up, and eventually the person would end up on our doorstep again after all this cycle was over and over. All this did was raise blood pressure, trigger the person experiencing homelessness so that they'd be more tense and afraid the next time they got on transit or the next time someone called the cops on them. And it pretty much wasted taxpayer resources. That was very, very clear to me working there over and over the course of a couple years. So that's why I really, really believe that Opal's vision that the way to a safer system is not through greater policing, but through things like advocacy, de-escalation, better services. I've seen the psychological damage that the current policing and transit system inflicts on people who literally have no other safe place to go and increasingly fewer places to go. And I believe raising fare prices and employing more police, rather than hiring people who are trained like me in nonviolent de-escalation and social service support, leads to a vicious cycle that really leaves all of us, not just those people, but all of us more tense. So I know that TriMet has taken some really important steps towards envisioning a safe for all transit system. And I want to thank you for what you've done so far on this. But in the realm of specifics, I think our specifics of BRU have been pretty clear, including that the Safety Advisory Committee doesn't include an organization with the vision of leaders, of the people who are hardest affected by everything from racism and unemployment to COVID-19 and gentrification. And in order to guarantee a system that's really safe for everyone, but also that doesn't waste taxpayer resources, I believe TriMet needs to incorporate these voices into leadership meaningfully. That's all I've got. Thank you for your time.
Good testimony. Thank you very much. Jeff?
All right, next person is Tristan Isaac. Tristan, I am unmuting you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Can, Tristan. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, I want to start by saying that, well, my name is Tristan. I'm a member of Bus Riders Unite, and thank you for the opportunity to testify. And I want to start by saying that Bus Riders Unite stands in solidarity with the workers of Amalgamated Transit Union 757 and their fight for a fair contract. So this morning, I'd like to speak on TriMet's ongoing project known as Reimagining Public Safety and Security on Transit. To begin, I'd like to ask, what does it mean to reimagine something? To me, it means discarding all of one's preconceived notions about what is possible and embracing the revolutionary. With that in mind, I've been disappointed to find TriMet's approach not at all equal to the task this political moment calls for. It's hard to picture a world without police. All of us have lived in a society that constantly reinforces the idea that police keep us safe. From popular crime dramas portraying cops as heroes, to the almost unparalleled political clout of police officer associations. However, the evidence increasingly shows that cops merely reinforce the structural violence that leads to criminal behavior and do nothing to address the root causes. Tens of thousands of people marching in the streets for months on end demand that we reimagine a truly just world free from the violence of police. This is where TriMet is falling short. While a divestment of $1.8 million is a great start, TriMet's approach to this process makes me afraid that they will go no further. TriMet executives themselves have stated they have no interest in abolishing the transit police, and the makeup of the newly assembled Transit Safety Advisory Committee reflects that perspective. While it does include many representatives from valued local organizations who work with elders, with disabilities, and youth, it also includes a number of representatives from the police, both transit and otherwise. many of whom are from outside the TriMet area and have no experience dealing with our local system. What's missing from this committee is a local transit advocacy group. In fact, despite expressing keen interest in being part of this committee, from the very beginning, my organization, Opal, has been explicitly barred from attending by TriMet representatives. If allowed to sit at this table, we would have been the only organization with an abolitionist lens. If TriMet's goal is to truly reimagine public safety and security, why would they exclude such a strong voice advocating for a just and equitable transit system in the local community? Why move forward with a committee handpicked by TriMet executives that includes industry insiders and representatives of the status quo without local experience? In order to bring about the goal of defunding the police that so many are calling for, TriMet must heed the expertise of abolitionist groups like Opal rather than staying mired in the status quo, and they must commit to the abolition of the transit police and not just a mere 1.8 million divestment. Thank you.
Thank you, Tristan. Maybe at the end of this, I'll ask Doug or John Gardner to kind of just give us a quick response on this, because again, as I said, your voices need to be heard, and you should be involved in a meaningful way. So we'll make sure that we get some answers for you on that. So thank you. Jeff?
All right, last person with their hand up is Lee Helfand. Lee, I am unmuting you now.
Awesome. Can you all hear me?
We can.
Great. Good morning. My name is Lee Helfand. I use they, them pronouns, and I am with Opal and BRU. I just wanted to echo the sentiments that have already been named here today and just kind of build off that by saying that an abolitionist framework is not a radical framework. I think that it's pretty easy to pigeonhole communities of color and transit-dependent folks as radical or in some way outside of the mainstream. But an abolitionist framework is not radical. We can see this demonstrated in other parts of the country, even here in our own state. And we know that internationally, United States, in comparison to other major countries, has a huge problem with policing. That is where the energy behind so many of the uprisings is coming from, is that we know we actually don't have to reimagine. We can look to other models to see how we can do this differently. I think that what I see in a lot of people within TriMet is being complicit in the status quo, maybe feeling like you don't have the answers for how to move forward, getting lost in a bureaucratic process for how things should be done. But we already know that an abolitionist framework can work. We have real solutions, and TriMet itself has implemented better solutions in the past. I think it's kind of silly that BRU and Opal have been highlighting these issues for so long, and it took uprisings to even get us to this point in the conversation. And I think it's kind of shameful. I think that we can recognize that this is a slow-moving agency that has resistance to change. And even with all the uprisings that have happened, we are still encountering a lot of resistance, namely being on the Safety Advisory Committee. Being on the Safety Advisory Committee is really not that big of an ask. The fact that we have to organize to even have this conversation at any length is kind of ridiculous and upsetting at this point. And I just want to emphasize that we are here to partner with you to help you in this process at every step of the way. We're not just throwing out solutions that we don't want to help create and build with you all. So please keep reaching out to us. We want to be involved in the process. We deserve a seat at the table. And I think we can do this a lot better if we all are able to work together. So please put Opal and BRU on the Safety Advisory Committee. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. It's appreciated. Jeff, are there anybody else who indicated they want to talk to us?
No, that's it.
Okay. Well, maybe I will ask again, maybe under your general manager's report, to talk about any response that might be helpful for these folks, because I think we understand their concerns and want to make sure that they do have an opportunity to participate and be involved. With that, then, I'm going to conclude the public forum, and I'm going to move on then to the regular business meeting agenda for the date is, I'm going to call to order the regular business meeting of the TriMet Board of Directors for October 28th, 2020. And the first things on the agenda are the board reports. And I see that Director Bauman has the first two, and I'm going to ask her to maybe give us her report on the Accountability Committee. Director Bauman, are you ready?
Yes, I am ready. Good morning, everyone. Right, I've got the Accountability Committee and the Accessibility Committee, and even though they sound similar, they have very different portfolios. So the Accountability Committee, I report to you on that committee just 2 times a year. So I like to give you a recap on what the committee's mission is, and it's two primary roles. One is to keep an eye on the transparency and accountability page on the TriMet website, and that includes financial and planning and governance material. And second is to oversee the hotline for employee reports of fraud, waste, and abuse. And that hotline has been expanded to also accept requests for safety assessments. So at the meeting, the most recent meeting, October 15th, I believe, the committee looked at the statistics for the Accountability and Transparency website, comparing September 2020 and September 2019. And the number of page views to that site have dropped about 33%, perhaps not terribly surprising given the effects of the pandemic. We also heard that the employee hotline, received 7 complaints since March, all 7 related to either safety assessments or human resources complaints. There were no reports of fraud, waste, and abuse. The reports that were received were directed to the appropriate division for follow-up. And finally, we discussed the possibility of making this employee hotline available on a mobile phone app in addition to the other ways that employees can access it. And so we discussed that and requested additional information. And that is what that committee discussed, and it will meet again next March.
Good. Any questions for Director Bauman by board members? I'm seeing nobody with their hand raised. So Director Bauman, do you want to move on? You have some things to report on the Committee for Accessible Transportation?
Yes, the CAT met October 21st. I'll give you a quick report. The CAT heard from TriMet staff about the Better Red project. And in particular, they heard details about making the new platform at Gateway accessible to people with disabilities and limited mobility. Randy Lyle of the TriMet staff discussed the signage at that location, but also importantly, the configuration of ADA accessible parking at the Gateway Transit Center. That parking is going to include a number of ADA quick drop stalls, and after discussion, the CAT formally endorsed making all of the ADA stalls van accessible at Gateway. There was a report on lift performance. We heard about improved on-time performance and minimal hold time at the call center. And while paratransit has been safe in terms of avoiding the spread of COVID, lift ridership is still down, currently about 72% due to the pandemic. I also want to go back and report briefly on a CAT ad hoc meeting on October 2nd. At that meeting, the CAT heard a presentation on PBOT's draft ADA plan, and that plan addresses how PBOT makes streets and public buildings accessible. CAT members discussed how the city needs to better coordinate with TriMet on making bus stops accessible, and members also asked for guidance about how to make complaints about issues such as uneven and damaged sidewalks and inaccessible crosswalk buttons. And what this meeting just drove home to me again, how engaged CAT members are. They're really out there in the community and very engaged in making the city generally more accessible, but in particular making transit as accessible as possible. That's it. Happy to answer questions.
Good report. Comments or questions by board members? I'm not seeing any. Thank you very much, Director Bauman. We'll move on then to the Finance and Audit Committee. Director Stovall, are you there?
I am. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. The Finance and Audit Committee met this morning as we normally do before our board meetings, and we covered two items. The first item was an update on the financial picture based on kind of performance, and you will have that in your quarterly update in regards to kind of the details in regards to how we're doing financially. As everybody knows, we've seen quite a dramatic drop in revenues and passenger revenues, and of course ridership due to the ongoing pandemic. And so that's going to be reflected in that information kind of that's been provided to the board. And secondly, we actually just got an update on the Southwest Corridor, which we normally do. And I believe that we are scheduled as a board to receive a more comprehensive update on the Southwest Corridor in December at our December board meeting. So at this point, are there any questions or comments or thoughts? President Warner and Director Simmons, they're both on the Finance and Audit Committee. So if I've left anything out, certainly please feel free to fill in. But we only covered those two quick items this morning.
I don't see anybody wanting to add anything to your report. Thank you, Travis. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Director Way, is there a report from the Metro Policy Advisory Committee?
Yes, just one second. All my notes. Yes, there are things that we discussed at the mid-October MPAC meeting. One of those items is Employment Land Site Readiness Toolkit Update. This is in partnership with the Port of Portland, Greater Portland, Inc., and 13 other jurisdictional partners from around the region. The main idea with this initiative is really to improve the development and readiness of sites in the region, to really better understand employment and industrial land. I think this is pertinent to TriMet as we're thinking about transit access, particularly for employers. I thought that Metro staff did a really great job also outlining a lot of the equity assessments and the equity impacts that this could create, that these sites can create in our different areas. So it was a really informative presentation. The second piece, which I think is also really important to highlight, is just really, where's the direction going for MPAC as a committee and as a role? As folks may remember, MPAC is an advisory group to really advise the Metro Council, particularly around land use issues. It's been an interesting discussion. I've been on MPAC for about 2 years now. And there was a survey that was released to really just talk about what has been committee members' experience, how long should meetings be, et cetera. So about 13 folks responded to that survey. And in summary, we also had a lot of time to do small group breakout discussions, just sort of based on some of the questions that staff had for us. So overall, a lot of folks found the impact table to be helpful. They wanted to see an increased engagement and a discussion on how we can really advise Metro Council on policy. Many of us reported that, of course, due to COVID, the online learning has been sort of mixed. I think a lot of people appreciated the virtual meeting space because if you remember, these meetings typically start at 5 p.m. on work days, and it's just hard with traffic and everything else to go to these meetings, especially if you're a working person. So a lot of folks have said the online format has been better for them. When asked about the different perspectives that are being represented on MPAC, this was also maybe not that surprising, but the general, demographics of MPAC members are over 40 years old, white, have a higher than average income. So, a lot of us have said MPAC really does not present a racial diversity and can definitely include more perspectives from young people, people living with disabilities, as well as other advocates. So we are going to be on a continual journey to, again, figure out the direction of impact as well as the composition. And there are no board meetings, there are no impact meetings scheduled for November. The next one will be in December. And that's all I have.
Wow, sounds like you had a very rich discussion. Comments, questions by the board?
Yes, I couldn't find the hand raising function, but happy to just raise my hand the old school way. Thanks for sharing that, Director Y. I'm really curious about the use of the survey internally with the committee, because something the committee, the Transit Equity Advisory Committee is always working through is how to better engage and leverage the members of the team. So I'd love to see if we can glean any insight from the use of that process so that we can have a similar sort of thing. I think that would be very useful with another community-focused committee that has engagement at its center.
Absolutely, Director Gonzalez. Thank you for raising that point. I will definitely connect you with some of the staff who developed that survey. And I'm not sure if the survey findings are also public, but I will ask, and I think that information will be, valuable for all of us just moving forward. Thank you.
I had a question, Director Y, as well, regarding the meetings and the challenge with folks getting off work and being able to get to the meetings. Are there other opportunities? Has there been other opportunities looked at for making it more convenient for the committee members to attend the meetings?
We did talk about that. I think at this point, the frequency of these meetings, the times, that is still, I think, up for discussion. One of the things that was also raised in these meetings was if they are going to continue to happen in person, is childcare, right? I think for particularly maybe some of the newer voices that we want to recruit, childcare, I think, is going to be a challenge, especially in this time and age. So we did talk about perhaps, changing the meeting time so that it will be more accessible for caregivers. But we also talked about potentially providing childcare at the meetings as well, so that, again, we can have more of a representation of voices.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions by the board members? I don't hear any. Thank you, Director Wade. That was a good report, and we look forward to hearing more about the outcomes of this effort. That's good. So the last board report is the Transit Equity Advisory Committee, TEAC. Director Gonzalez.
Present and accounted for. We had a meeting on October 11th, and it was a report out agenda where the Equity Advisory Committee had information about service planning. Tom Mills came and provided some information about some of the updates to line 19, as well as line 15 at Thurman in the Northwest. There's some general information about how the service planning updates are made, and there were some specific planning updates that were brought to TEAC and discussed there in the committee. And then ODOT came and presented on another pretty exciting thing happening with their toll program. ODOT not only provided an update on the toll program and some of the latest with some of the routes and discussions around tolling, but they came with an invitation to the members of TEAC on how to engage they're at a position where they really want to make sure they've got touch points in the community. So members of TIAC, folks that are present at these meetings or had an opportunity to interface with ODOT, and we'll have an open invitation for community engagement around the toll. Right now, ODOT is in this sharing phase, and they really acknowledge it needs work so that they can get some meaningful community feedback. So that was an exciting thing to listen in on. There was an update on Title VI from from TriMet staff, and it was an update on the civil rights program and the latest reporting. And then there was an update on public safety and the Reimagining Public Safety Committee, the formation of it. Got some feedback from TIAC at that time as well. So we had an opportunity to hear from Opal, Bus Riders Unite. We had some discussion there relative to comments in today's public forum. And it was an opportunity to not only get the update on the committee, but to hear about what's next. And so I know that there's a little bit of that in today's general manager's presentation. And that's the entirety of the agenda that was covered on the October 11th meeting. I don't have the date of the next meeting for TIAC. I believe the November meeting has not been scheduled, but I could be mistaken. If anyone from staff knows the date, I'd be happy to report back on that when I receive it. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Gonzalez. Does the board have any comments or questions on the Transit Equity Advisory Committee?
I do.
All right, please.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I'm also trying to figure out the whole hand raising thing. Director Gonzalez, I thank you for the presentation. I just have a quick question on, I know that there was sort of this youth subcommittee or like this youth representation in TIAC. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the work that has been doing that has been done to engage the youth, particularly around the safety and transit discussion? If you have any updates, I'm just curious.
Sure. Thank you for the question, Director Y. Yes, there's a standing presence in the Transit Equity Advisory Committee of youth riders through the Multnomah County Youth Authority. They've had several members that have come from more than one area in the jurisdiction that have been participating in TIAC. And before we went virtual, the physical presence has always been a challenge for everyone at 5 p.m. on a weekday, but I'd say especially for transit dependent riders that are coming not from the downtown core, from those outer areas. So there was a request in those times from the youth participating in TIAC to have a committee specifically focused around youth engagement. And the youth members from the Multnomah County Youth Authority were the ones that were championing and stewarding that effort. TriMet had set up a pilot subcommittee in that time where the engagement was done throughout the jurisdiction, and the youth were able to set up that committee. I'll be frank, once we went into COVID and virtual mode, I lost track of whether that subcommittee had any ongoing activity. I know that it was in the getting set up, and it was in the kind of establishment phase right at the latter half of 2019 when we were transitioning, I'd say, into this virtual world. So there was that was all in advance of the discussions about the reimagining public safety. I defer to the update that will be given subsequent to this as to the formation of that committee. But at this time, there's no presence from the Multnomah County Youth Authority specifically that I'm aware of on that Reimagining Public Safety Committee. There remains a youth presence standing on the Transit Equity Advisory Committee, which does have a touch point and will have a touch point through TriMet for the Reimagining Public Safety. So there's a couple of elements of youth involvement within TIAC.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm just interested, after talking to some of the youth in Clackamas County, most of them are transit dependent. They are very much interested in, leadership development, getting involved in some of our efforts. And so I think that's really great background information. And hopefully we can get the ball rolling again and really trying to be intentional about integrating this youth voice into the security and the TIAC and the other efforts. But I do have some names that I would love to recommend if that is something that is up for discussion later on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good discussion. Anybody else comments or questions for Director Gonzalez? I'm not hearing any or seeing any hands raised, so I'm going to move on then to the General Manager's report. Mr. General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Board President. Good morning, everybody. So yeah, for the General Manager's report, we have a number of updates for you. The first one, I'll cover a quick update on COVID, talk about ridership briefly for the last month, and we will come back and to talk about the review and reimagining public safety. So John Gardner is going to give us an update on that. So, and perhaps John can talk specifically to the committee, the names on the committee, structure, et cetera, as that was even part of the public delegations. Also want to give you an update on the budget, how we're doing. I think we're trying to report back on a quarterly basis, I think, per the board's request, particularly with the financial challenges we've got in the world we all live in right now. And we'll also give a quarterly performance report, which is due to you. Sam Dessou will do that. And finally, Guy Ben will give an update on a potential proposal on a TOD that the team's been working behind the scenes on for quite some time. So firstly, COVID, just the latest efforts here is we've now got on essentially almost the whole fleet here now, the dispensers, the mass dispensers, the permanent ones, on the Max fleet, the buses, Wes is done, and Lyft has its own unique way of distributing because it's more of an on-demand, one-to-one relationship. So feeling pretty good about that. And in fact, we've been giving out over 3 million masks on the system to date. So they seem to be in demand. I think we've got a pretty darn high compliance. We're not perfect. We do know because of the sensitivity for some who maybe have health conditions where they can't wear a mask. So we're trying to be sensitive about this, and reading, you can see even on the bus scrolls we had put on, mask required. So we're trying to do as much communication as we can around being safe and secure. And I think even if you look around, there's more and more studies coming out now where in fact transit is not seen as a conduit for COVID, which has been great. And I think I'm really proud of all the work our team has done behind the scenes. And I think our results are evident of that so far. By the way, so the operator safety panels, I think I mentioned last time, on all vehicles that leave our shop every day to provide service, every one of them for our bus operators. There's very few agencies in North America who actually have this in place. We're one of them now. But to help our operators as a secondary measure in addition to the masks, which we see them all wearing as the buses go by and the trains go by every day. The cash fares I'm not sure if I mentioned at the last board meeting, so I held off on collecting cash fares until we had some confidence that the bus barriers were on the whole fleet that was in service. So that's now the case. And I think that the cash fare collection's now been turned back on, if you will, to the public. And it seems to be going really quite well. So I have even heard from operators thanking us for doing that, because in fact, some of it had created conflict for them and or tied up the running time, things of that nature, while they explained why some paid, some didn't pay, etc. So it seems to be going quite well overall. We do continue to educate our riders. I don't think it'll never end until this vaccine is implemented and we have a cure and we get back to whatever the new normal is. We did do a rider survey though, and they did tell us they're looking for a steady, ongoing frequency of information from TriMet. So we're really trying to give them more information on a consistent basis now. So, for example, we've produced recently a series of videos with the Multnomah County Communicable Health Director that answers questions around the ABCs of the coronavirus and how do you get around on transit. So we use actually third-party validators of some of the healthy steps to take to continue to use our system. So again, with the existing investment in the literally millions and millions, I think it's about 10 to $12 million we've got in sanitizer and masks and operator safety panels and all the other communication pieces that we've got going on. We want to, if people don't feel safe and secure, we know they're not going to come unless they have no other choice. So we want them to feel safe and secure. So we have to be careful. Let's not market ourselves until we're really ready that public confidence is there. So we take that really serious. We've also sent out a number of news releases and videos that show the cleaning staff, our process. Some of you may have seen them. I think all of them are online as well. Everything we're doing to keep the system safe. And just as so the board's aware, we also check in and get a daily report around what activities are all the other, most all the other transit agencies in North America doing with their COVID practices. So we try and learn. And if there's something we think is a nugget that might be helpful and applicable for our circumstances, we factor that in, and we have a committee that actually looks at that. So I just want to let you know, so we're not just looking at things in an isolated bubble, if you will. So we continue to take information in and filter it accordingly. We also, by the way, did produce an animation and a blog post that demonstrates the ventilation system specifically, because that's been asked about, all the circulating air and what's the best practices to do so people, particularly on MAX, can feel confident. The air they're breathing is filtered and it's also well circulated. So that's available for people as well. And again, they're all available on the different YouTube channels and on our website if you're so inclined to see those. The second topic, ridership. For the month of September, we carried just under 3.2 million riders. That continues to be down sharply, of course, because of COVID and the economy. Right now, year over year, that represents about 40% of our normal ridership. So if you do go back to last September, though, we also had launched a significant new amount of service at that time. So we continue to remain under pressure ridership wise. I did see the MTA in New York, for example, is one of the agencies I follow quite closely. They're still on their subway system down 70%. So this continues to be a national challenge and an industry challenge for everybody, and we're not exempt from that. So we are seeing the greatest deficits inside the numbers during the commuting or specifically the peak hours. Our weekend service, for example, though, it's down about 49%, and our frequent service bus lines are down 40%. So there is some movement around there underneath the averages, but the ridership continues to be challenged. So we did, if you recall, back in September, we did restore some service back by about 10%. So part of that was intended to try and prime the pump of more usage a bit, but we are starting to track over the next several months. Do we keep that service level out or not? Or is there beyond essential services or something where there's some uptick where people are voting with their feet and actually using our service? So we're going to continue to monitor that, particularly the next couple of months coming up. I think will be important too, and we'll share that with the board. In terms of reimagining public safety, maybe I'm going to ask John if he can unmute, John Gardner, that is, excuse me. We did reach a new milestone since the last meeting as the Transit Advisory Committee started to hold their meetings. We brought together a pretty darn diverse and incredibly talented group. And I know sitting in on the first meeting, it was quite interesting as the group went around and as they were all introduced to each other, they were all complimenting the diversity and the strength of the group amongst themselves, and they were frankly honored to be with their fellow peers. I know we actually have on our committee, and John can talk to this further, we have representation on the committee, and you can never really have everybody on this committee. If at some point we're kind of stretched now, we've got, I think it's about 15, John can comment to, on the committee, which is challenging as a number to work through with the confines that we've got and the restrictions we've got trying to advance this conversation. But some of the members we have on the committee represent over 20,000 people who have actually their customers and clients, from homelessness to mental health and such. These are people who deliver service every single day. And so that's where the rubber hits the road for us. And that's where we've had a lot of desires, you heard some today, for people wanting to be on the sort of blue ribbon or advisory committee. But that's not to say people can't provide input in many and numerous different ways. We've had elected officials who've wanted to be on the committee as well, and others. So I think you'll see from John's comments that we have a significant emphasis on those who deliver service every single day out there and really live and breathe this across the region in a number of processes. So the committee itself, so far, they've met 4 times, a total of about 8 hours so far. This is a heavy lift for the group. And I really want to thank them, and it's been fascinating listening to some of the conversations. So very talented group. So it's a big commitment, and we really appreciate their time, energy, and the robust engagement that's already started, and it's underway right now. So John, I'm just going to maybe turn it over to you with, I'll pause here. And if you wouldn't mind also just if you had any comments around the TEC Youth Committee that I think Director Way was actually inquiring about as well. If you can kind of sneak that in there, that'd be helpful as well.
Great, thank you, Doug. Yeah, let me start with the TEC Youth Committee, and then you'll see them in terms of what we represented for the Reimagine update. So we did, Director Gonzalez was correct. We started a TEC Youth Committee early, I want to say it was last year, right before the pandemic hit. And we did partner with Multnomah County Youth Commission to do a lot of the outreach, as well as our high school access youth transit program. And we tried to figure out, can we do this on Saturday? Can we do it using technology so folks don't have to travel? And we got lukewarm response in terms of youth wanting to give up a weekend to be part of TriMet's youth committee. But we were trying to accommodate that reality. But since that time, Maria Klemenko has actually been able to grow that group a little bit and sustain it even through the current pandemic. And the youth committee did convene and have their own focus group around the Reimagine Safety conversation. So, and just, we do have youth from Milwaukee, but I would love to hear other youth from Clackamas, from any of you in terms of youth that want to be involved. But we have youth from Gresham, from Tigard, from just all over the region, Lake Oswego, a lot of Portland youth, Beaverton, like I said, Happy Valley. But we're interested in getting more. So, and I could talk more about the youth committee and what its work is and what they produced at a future meeting, but they've been definitely involved in this process. So let me transition to a update on the Reimagine program, and I'm going to share my screen. All right, can folks see that?
We can.
Excellent. So as Doug said, the committee is off and running, and we've already convened 4 times. And just as a quick primer and reminder about this, this all came about when TriMet's leadership decided to disinvest from the regional transit policing contract and use those savings instead to invest in community-informed strategies that make the system more safe and welcoming. Right. And so we've spent this summer essentially doing outreach and reaching out to the community across the Tri-County area and doing multiple community-wide listening groups and focus groups. And then recently we did convene and launch a local panel, and you'll see those folks in terms of how, and their job really is to take those recommendations, those ideas, and with the lens of understanding how the system operates and some of the challenges we face, and inform a series of recommendations back to TriMet's leadership in terms of what we can do to move forward that we hope to bring to you all during the November retreat. All of these recommendations are non-police community-informed initiatives or pilots that we believe can inform the larger approach to safety and security as part of the effort to reimagine. So who have we been working with and who's done the work? So we had multiple community-based organizations participate. What you see here is a list of those organizations that actually convened their own communities. Whether it was the African Family Holistic Health Organization, or Centro Cultural, or Constructing Hope, or Division Midway Alliance, El Programa Hispano, Plaza Media in the Soul District, FACT Oregon, Hockey, Home Plate Youth Services, ERCO, Join, Latino Network, Opal Yeja, Rosewood Initiative, and We All Rise. We feel we did a really good job working with folks who had the capacity during a very tough time to engage their community. And so all of this information, all of the findings, all of the recommendations has been provided to the committee, and that's informing their decisions. We also work with organizations who themselves manage coalitions. And I want to speak to, for example, Portland United Against Hate, who convene their members. And their membership does include organizations that are very much focused on the defund the police effort, as well as the abolitionist effort as well. And the groups that Portland United Against Hate convene and that we've heard from is the 107th, As the Spirit Moves Us, Apano, Black and Beyond the Binary Collective, CARE, Fair Housing Oregon, the Guardian Angels, Lewis and Clark Gender Project, Northeast Neighborhood Coalition, Portland Office of Community and Civic Life, Public Safety, PBOT, and Resolutions Northwest. And TriMet is actually a partner with Portland United Against Hate, and we participate in their monthly conversations just to keep us connected to what's happening, and I guess what I would say across the advocacy community. We also, as you know, have been working with the Coalition of Communities of Color, and they convene their members. And the groups that they convene for the Safety Reimagined conversation that we've heard from, that we received report and recommendations for, that have informed this process were Africa House and the Slavic Network of Oregon, Kairos PDX, Latino Network, NEA, Opal, Oregon Futures Lab, Portland African American Leadership Forum, Portland Community Reinvestment Initiatives, Self-Enhancement Incorporated, Unite Oregon, Bear Day, Apano, and Hacienda. So we feel really good about the many voices, the many diverse voices who developed recommendations, who were able to sit and discuss and think through strategies for us, and who ultimately will and have been informing this process. And of course, TriMet itself, we convened our committees, which you can see, we convened the TIAC committee, we convened CAT, and we committed the youth committee that we formed and had really good conversations. All of these committees and all of these convenings resulted in reports that were part of the master background that we've been providing the larger panel that has informed the recommendations. The reports and the questions and the conversations were all built off the same questions we asked the over 12,000 people who responded as part of our survey, right? So when we talk about the survey results and the temperature gauge we have about how people feel, those questions were the same ones we used as centering questions for these different conversations. But I think someone mentioned this earlier, we also heard directly beyond the surveys from our writers, and we brought in 4 different writer focus groups, 2 from our Writers Club and 2 from our Low Income Fair program. So we know that the Low Income Fair program, these writers are all under 200% of the federal poverty level. So we heard exactly what they think and what they feel TriMet should be working towards, as well as our own team of employees across different employee groups. We did a lot of work to make sure their voice was part of this process as well. So let's talk a little bit about who we pulled into this. And I agree with Doug. It is an incredibly impressive group. And I think it's actually very balanced, both geographically and service or system-wise. So we have Marcus Mundy from the Coalitions of Communities of Color, Joe McFerrin from POIC Rosemary Anderson High Schools. We have Anthony Deloney from Self-Enhancement Incorporated. We have Patricia Daniels from Constructing Hope. We have Jan Campbell from Disability Rights Oregon and CAT. We have Kevin Modica, who is a retired transit police commander, but also works with Representative Lou Frederick. So he understands regional governance and community issues as well. We also have Kenichi Onigishu from Professional Builders Development Group. We have Deshaun Hardy from Highland African American Youth Coalition. We have Lakanya Drury from Word is Bond. We have Laura Cohen from Cascadia Behavioral Health. We have Jackie Yerby from Basic Rights Oregon. We have Jonathan Colon from Centro Cultural. We do have Dr. Beverly Scott. She's supported the organization in the past around helping us create a diversity plan for our workforce. And obviously, being a general manager of 2 other properties, she brings a lot of expertise to the conversation. We have Emily Nelson from Join, and we have Kim Cota from the Clackamas County Development Disability Services. So I would just hopefully not have to point out, but some of the folks on this list, many of the folks on this list, have been working, whether it was for culturally specific organizations or holistic family and youth education and social service organizations for decades. So this idea that we don't have folks who understand racism as it exists in this community, or the effects of gentrification as it has occurred in this community, or what is happening with COVID-19 is very disappointing. And I would just ask for folks to just take a look at the folks on this list. And if they need additional information, which we will have biographies and the final report, but we feel like that those voices are very much represented in this conversation. So where we're at, we are about halfway done. We spent the first 4 meetings really socializing the committee to safety on the system, the scale of our system, our operations, the results of the survey. As I said earlier, we did hear from 12,500 respondents about what their thoughts were about how they feel about certain safety strategies, but also what ideas they have for how we can move forward. And all of that information is informing the committee, as well as the lived, learned, and professional experience of every committee member. And so now we'll be transitioning to the recommendation stage, where we will once again show the committee what we heard from our community-based organizations, what we heard from the survey, what we heard from our writers, what we heard from our writers of color or our limited English proficient communities. And they will use all of that to help develop a series of ideas to go forward to TriMet's leadership and ultimately to you all in terms of what's accomplishable or what they think we should be prioritizing with this $1.8 million, which is not the end of the project, but to me, it's really the beginning. One of the things I want to talk about is what happens after you all are seeing these final recommendations. We begin sort of creating that plan to advance those recommendations. We definitely believe we'll be reconstituting our current safety subcommittee of TIAC and giving them the charge for ongoing work and development around these issues. So we're not stopping. We don't know if all of the current committee members are going to be part of that. I think we'll be bringing in additional folks. We did ask Opal to be part of that because that's more of an ongoing system implementation of this work and other things that potentially are bigger than what we are able to accomplish with the charge of the Reimagine group. But I feel really good about what we've done so far, who we brought to the table, and how we're going to go forward. And just as a reminder, all of the meetings are online and folks can log in and see it. All of the materials we'll be posting on the webpage that we want to use and leverage going forward. I do want to address maybe some of the concerns, I guess, that were brought up by Opal around youth involvement and other things. So of the 12,000 surveys, almost 1,200 of those came from youth, 16 to 24. I think maybe 120 or so were from 16 to 18, and the other 1,100 were 18 to 24. So that combined with our TriMet Youth Committee, with the Multnomah County Youth Commission, with YEJA, which is Opal's youth group, who we contracted with and paid to have a focus group and inform the process, we feel the youth voice is very much as built into this conversation and into these recommendations. As far as Opal itself being on the committee, as you can see, I can go back and we have a very robust committee. But one of the things I think, if you didn't track it, I'll show you again. What's exciting is that Opal, who's a great organization in terms of advocacy and organizing. Generally speaking, we didn't need advocacy and organizing because that would have been used to create the project. But TriMet's general manager led on this issue and reduced our regional footprint for transit policing, and then set aside resources. And generally, that's what you would advocate for, which I think you heard in their comments about reducing the number of police. We've done that, and we've set aside resources. But still, I think Opal actually, when you look at it, might have had the most involvement. Not only were they paid and contracted to do focus groups, they were part of TIAC's initial development of the project, and they were also part of multiple community convenings in terms of all the recommendations. And so we have their report, as well as their feedback across the other, I want to say the Coalition of Communities of Color group and the Portland United Against Hate group. So we feel really good about what they were hoping for this project to achieve, as well as what their message was. I think writer advocates was a question on the survey. It received a lot of support, and that's going to be one of the things the committee gets to wrestle with in terms of recommendations. So although they're not a member of the committee itself, their vision or their agenda or their ideas are definitely represented. So I feel really good about their ability and their participation in the project so far. Other than that, we've heard only good things from the communities and the organizations which we believe represent the Tri-County area from the process to date. And I think when we come back to you at the end of this, we'll have some of the community partners who participated walk through what they feel the experiences was and their hopes for what happens next. So that's where we're at. I'd love to answer any additional questions.
Excellent report. Go ahead, Keith, is that you?
Yes, thank you, Bruce. Thank you, John. That was a very good presentation. I had a question on the fourth bullet on the second slide. It talks about piloting new non-police community informed response resources. Are you getting suggestions, good suggestions, I should say, and when I say good suggestions, I mean suggestions that are viable that can be used in regards to structurally and design-wise and with implementation that's going to be successful in providing safety and security for the not only the employees but for transit clients as well.
Yeah, we're getting a ton of really, really good suggestions. And some of the suggestions potentially go beyond the scope of the community's charge for community informed or community opportunities for investment. There are some infrastructure, lighting, SEPTED sort of safety design things. And one of the things I want to mention is all of the information we've gathered, it's not just for the committee, it's for the agency itself. And so there's a lot we're going to be able to take away from the surveys and from the focus groups that we're going to be able to work through and try to think about how we can move forward beyond the scope of the committee itself that are just really good ideas that I think Marlon and her team and others around here are excited to sort of understand and unpack. So, for example, you can imagine there are infrastructure recommendations that might be very expensive, but they're more about strengthening the appealingness of the system itself, right? So it's more about making the system welcoming and safe from an infrastructure standpoint that we could possibly accomplish through other more maintenance of way or just general infrastructure updates. But yeah, we're getting a lot of really good ideas. And the challenge really is trying to focus the committee on, what is achievable through this community's charge and what might have a continual life in other arenas.
Thank you very much. Because one of my concerns is this reimagining of non-police is there's a concern, of course, for the safety of the traditional aspect of it in regards to our customers and in regards to our workers and employees. But also I'm concerned about the safety of those new personnel that are going to have to be putting themselves in harm's way sometimes in order to make sure that everyone else is safe. So that's my concern as well.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I see we have two board members who've mastered the technology. I'll call on Director Bauman first.
Thank you. Yes, the location of the raise hand button has moved, at least on my screen. So I figured it out. Hey, John, thank you so much. I really appreciate all of the work that's gone into this and all the voices from the community that you've gathered. My question is real simple. I see that on the website, the town hall, the recordings of the town hall events are available. Are you going to make available recordings of the advisory committee meetings? Are they going to be posted?
Yeah, I think we are. I think we're trying to figure out, is it better to do it as part of our YouTube channel? But we do them real time. But yeah, we want to make everything available because, like I said, the website itself, we want to use as an ongoing platform. So we're going to be sending an update to all of our project partners this week just about where we're at, similar to this, but maybe more narrative form, and remind them that they can be part of the real-time process and just thanking them. And we're trying to figure out how we can also send an update to all the folks that took the survey just to keep everybody engaged. But we see that web page as being sort of a portal that we can continue to communicate progress on the recommendations, but also hopefully the investments. But yeah, I do think the videos themselves, we're trying to figure out how do they're saved in Zoom, but I think we're going to transition them to YouTube. So anyone can look at the process or the conversations. And we're trying to make this as transparent and accessible as possible. Other questions?
I see Director Way.
Thank you. I think Director Bauman took my question around sort of that public availability piece of information. I think also just related to that, will meeting agendas be posted in advance just so that we can sort of have a higher level view of what the discussion topics will be at each meeting? John, you mentioned that there were 4 meetings already taken place, I think, which is great. And I also want to acknowledge that these are all volunteers who are, probably working really full-time jobs and then also committing their time and their effort into this. So I really want to thank you for, for recruiting and sort of retaining this group. So before I ask other questions, I just want to ask about that sort of the meeting agendas and whether or not they will also be available.
Yeah, we communicated the meeting schedule and the sort of the high level agenda, like here's the 3 things we're talking about. We could probably do a better job to send out like, hey, tonight it's this conversation. To be fair, basically an hour of the 2 hours is fairly scripted, with the second hour being wherever the committee wants to go. So we can do that high level thing, which I don't think we've done consistently since the second meeting, but we can make sure we're doing that for tomorrow's meeting, for example.
Thank you. And I think as a board member, I mean, I would be interested in, again, just, seeing how these meetings are going, how the conversations are taking shape. So I have 2 other sort of just maybe committee structure questions. One is, how many folks do you feel like currently on the security committee represent transit dependent riders? Do you have a sense of?
Yeah, I'd say about 80% of the committee, I'd say about 80% of the committee represent transit dependent, transit reliant riders, right? Or whether, I think a good example would be, and youth came up a lot. So obviously SEI and POSC with their multiple locations and their history of serving culturally specific communities and families of color, and the fact that they provide secondary services across the East Portland, East Multnomah County, those folks. But I think even when you look at Cascade Behavioral Health, and Lauren Cohen spoke to this, her clients are using our system and transit dependent, right? And so are the Clackamas Development and Disability Service. Her clients are transit dependent, whether they're folks with disabilities or seniors. Obviously, Jen Campbell, but it might even be higher, Central Cultural, Jackie Yerby, who's on Basic Rights Oregon board, but also on the Portland Bike Trust and many other boards. Her community and her partners are transit users and transit dependent. So it's probably about 80 or 90%. In even our partners from APTA and obviously Dr. Scott understand the challenges for transit dependent communities. So we feel we have a ton of expertise on this committee.
Great, thank you. And just my final question is, obviously we'll get some recommendations from this body around how to move forward, but I'm sort of curious as to how those decisions will get made and whether or not, will it be consensus driven? Will it be majority? Will it be, I guess, what would the voting, if there is a voting process in place, what would that look like? And then who sets that? Is there a chairperson and a vice chair, or is it staff driven?
Yeah, so Marcus Mundy is the chair, and Jonathan Colon is the vice chair. And we're working with Allison Brown from GLA on the facilitation. We're building the process, so it's really more of how do people feel, because we don't want to silence, the single voice who might be advocating for X. So the idea is really what we're doing now is building up a matrix that we're going to be sharing tomorrow with a committee that shows all the different, I guess you could say maybe the top 25 or 30 ideas that came across from the different groups by group, so they can understand, the focus groups really like these ideas, the survey like these ideas, LEP like these ideas, BIPOC like these ideas, and with some space for them if they feel like an idea is not represented. And then we're going to ask them to take some time during the meeting, but also over the weekend, to really come back with what are their front runners. And I do think that, unfortunately or fortunately, 1.8 million is a lot of money, but it's finite. And so some of the stuff we're going to have to understand, where can we partner, right? Where can we partner, and are there existing services or resources we can align with or leverage? And that's why the committee going forward, the action group going forward, that will be working with Marla and her team and others to sort of make all this stuff materialize. That's why it's so important. But we're trying to, it won't be, this one is, I think it's more like the impression of the group is there's a lot of energy on this one. So this is one we feel confident in moving forward. And we'll circle back. The committee will know what we're bringing forward for them, that for leadership to consider.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right. Any other board members who've not been heard from have a question or comment? I'm not seeing it. I would just add, John, I'm really excited about what you folks are doing here. This is obviously a very inclusive process. I feel that the comments that were given to us earlier this morning are being addressed by this. They probably want a seat at that committee table, is what it sounded like to me. But it feels like they're definitely engaged in this, and I look forward to recommendations that will end up moving us forward in the future in a long-term way when we provide these services. So again, really do appreciate what you're doing, and it's a great effort. And so thanks to everybody who's been involved. It's great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Go ahead, Director Gonzalez.
Thank you. Thank you. I did manage to figure out the hand-raising function. Thank you for the whole crux, Director Bauman, saying it was in a different place. I just had to look elsewhere. I had a couple of things I just wanted to make sure to point out. First and foremost, thank you to John Gardner for the thorough overview of the engagement and for filling in my major void there on the youth engagement levels, because this has been a very deliberate effort. And thank you to Director Y for the question. I want to simply emphasize, for those that didn't see themselves on the list, whether it's a member of the community, a member of a transit dependent or a non-transit dependent organization who finds themselves very interested in this topic, there are multiple touch points, not only to stay informed, but to engage. And I'd say, if nothing else, you have a line of defense by reaching out to your district representatives from the TriMet board. Certainly happy to hear any perspective about what it should be considering. You see that there's a lot of folks involved that are very much near and dear to this conversation, whom are very interested in the best interests of the community at large. So I'm thrilled to see what comes out of this. And in closing, I want to acknowledge that we don't get to reinvent governance through this blue ribbon committee. So to Director Y's question about the authority in the final decision, correct me if I'm wrong, President Warner, but I believe that at the end of this process, what we could potentially see are going to be sets of policy recommendations or anything that could influence policy level decision making that will have to come to the board for consideration, and that this committee will be providing vetted and well community informed recommendations for anything that's going to touch policy. So I believe that this is where, at the end of the day, it comes back to us as the board to look at what it is that this process has yielded that constitutes any major shift in policy, which I anticipate should come as we're reimagining something at this fundamental stage.
Director Gonzalez, I agree with you completely. And the ultimate policy for us is our budget and where our resources are going. So that I expect a robust discussion of that as we get into the budget next year from the results of this work. Director Stovall, I missed your hand. Did you have a comment?
Yeah, thank you. Actually, I just raised it just before Director Gonzalez was talking. So yeah, I just want to make a couple quick comments. First and foremost, John, thank you for your work on all of this. This has been something that is critically needed, as everybody knows and has heard me say. I certainly believe that there's systemic and systematic racism that continues to occur throughout our state, throughout our city. And I think this is absolutely the step in the right direction. The review of the list of folks that have come together shows the commitment of so many people who really need to see and want to see the changes that need to occur. So I look forward to, of course, seeing what the outcomes of this great work will be, because it is sorely needed. I also want to quickly address, I was a bit disappointed by the comments of Bus Riders Unite. I've been on the board for quite some time now, and we have worked closely with them on so many things. We have listened on so many things, and to be told now that we as a board do not listen, for me is disappointing. I can think of so many areas where we've worked so directly with them on the everything from the strategic financial plan to the increasing the transfer time, to the work that we did with both them and the rest of our community with our low-income fare programs. They have been at the table for every single one of those conversations, and we have listened. So I am a bit disappointed that after all the work and opportunity they had to have this part of the conversation, that they would actually say that we as a board don't listen and haven't listened and incorporated their thoughts into our conversations when we have on so many occasions. And so I do want to say that I absolutely support the committee the group that has been put together. I think you've got some great thought leaders, John, both locally and nationally, that have an opportunity to lean into this conversation in a real way and actually make some recommendations for our agency to continue to be responsive to our community. So thank you for the hard work. And again, I look forward to, as Director Way, as she mentioned, it would be good to have kind of continuing kind of updates on the agendas and things like that, so that we can be well informed, because this is something that I think our stakeholders, our community, our transit dependent folks, our BIPOC folks, our Black, Brown, and Indigenous people of color are going to be very concerned about and very interested in. So again, I just want to say thank you for all the hard work, and I look forward to the continued work that's going to go on in this important topic.
Thank you, Director Sobel. Any final comments on this? I'm hearing none and seeing none. So, Mr. General Manager, back to you.
Yeah, thank you. And again, thanks to John, and there's a whole team behind John here. And I think something from my perspective that I see that is that when you really stand back and look at this, between the efforts going into data analysis, the vastness of the research itself, not one group is here to drive the agenda. As you can see, we've tried to intentionally and consciously, whether it be youth, whether it be homelessness, whether it be behavioral health, whether it be our own employees, is really this is probably the widest extensive outreach and listening we've tried to do. Are we perfect? I don't think so. I think it's hard. I'm not sure what perfect looks like. I'm so far from it myself, but I think our efforts are really trying to do this really important work that has to culminate into recommendations to come to the board. And we, as John's indicated, we need to do this in an openly transparent way. And I think there's not one thing that is going to be a quick fix. Some of this is evolutionary, it's cultural, there is systemic bias out here. So it's going to be short, medium, and long term, I believe, that what you will see come back to you in different forms. To the point that which I really liked that Director Edwards made around the piloting piece, that fourth bullet on one of the slides, we're going to have to venture into things and be willing to fail, to come back, to regroup. So that's where the word pilot is. So we're going to get over our skis a little bit on a few things that all of this we have to financially be able to afford, particularly in today's world that we all live in economically. So we're going to have to balance all of those things. But pilot for me is to test new muscle that we haven't really contemplated before, without just unleashing it blindlessly to have to pick up massive pieces on the other side. So I think I'm personally looking forward to still what's possible, but we're still very much at a listening stage. So to whether it be Opal, to our other partners in the community, other government agencies, please, as others have indicated, put your thoughts in writing. We want to hear those. And there are numerous ways to connect and communicate. So and if we haven't got it right, this journey is going to continue. You just don't get to, I think we're scheduled for the November board strategy session. So do not want to have this as a separate, just part of the resolution. We want to take strategic time to really contemplate this, to factor in, as President Warner, you've indicated, to factor this into our priorities, our strategic business plan, into the way we do business. And yes, ultimately that'll be supported with the financial budget process that we're under now. So I think the timing does come together appropriately for the cycle that we're in. And I think there's other members of the community that have already, if they've tried to bite this apple in their respective jurisdictions, they've already pushed examples, already pushed things off for a year because they've realized how complex these things are. We're not doing that. We're taking a different approach where, in fact, some elected officials I've spoken to directly, have said, wow, we're going so fast. How can you go so fast? So, well, if we go back just a number of months ago, there was a charge, there was a call to action. And that's exactly what this board, I believe, and I applaud the board for doing this, and what management's trying to respond to is the call to action, actually activating that call to action with a purposeful and meaningful set of disciplines to get to the outcomes that we will bring to you in just less than a month. So thanks to everyone for this really robust and really important discussion. So, and John, thanks to you as well. I'm going to segue. You're not finished with me yet. I'm now going to ask Dee to perhaps give us an update on our budget. We know our ridership is down, that we heard earlier, particularly for September, down by 60%. Less fare revenue coming in. There's a relationship, of course, even though we've turned fares back on. We also know the economic challenges that are continuing, not only here at TriMet, our riders. This is so painful to have to go through, and we all have experiences that we know of somebody else who's been impacted by this. And I want to just thank Dee for the incredible task and her own team of undertaking and managing the budgets in these, a bit of a rodeo, buck and bronco kind of time frame of instability. So Dee, thanks for your leadership on this and trying to help balance it. So if you can give us a quick update, that'd be great.
Sure. Thank you, Doug, and good morning, President Warner and members of the board. This is a quick recap of the quarterly report you received earlier that was quite lengthy with lots of graphs and so on. All the numbers are relevant to the end of the first quarter, September 30th of 2021, fiscal year 21. So hitting the high points on the revenue and expenses budget to actual information, our total revenue for the fiscal year in the first 3 months is below budget by 58.7 million or 28.3%. Total operating expenses are 31.8 million or 19.9% below budget. And the variance from budget in net results is 26.9 million or 7.1%. Now, the large variance on the revenue is due to a very simple matter, and that is on the CARES Act. We expected to receive a huge piece of that in fiscal year 20. We did not. We expected to receive it in fiscal year 21, and so budgeted, but in fact received it in fiscal year 20. Under operating revenues, we have passenger revenues at 6.2 million or approximately 40% below budget. Compared to the same quarter last year, the passenger revenues are down 18.1 million or 65%. This is concurrent with the ridership estimates, which are now running about 40 to 41% of pre-pandemic levels. Moving on to our non-operating revenues, our payroll tax in the first quarter of fiscal 21, our adopted budget adjusted payroll tax revenues are down by 67.7 million due to the pandemic projections. So that was what we put in the budget. But in the first quarter so far, our payroll tax revenues are greater than budget by 6.2 million or 7.2%. And this was due to the extension of the self-employment deadline to July 15, 2020, which subsequently pushed tax receipts into the first quarter of fiscal year 21. And due to this fluctuation in timing of receipts combined with the projected loss in payroll tax based on Eco Northwest projections as well as our own, it is really too soon to estimate with accuracy the full fiscal impact on fiscal year 2021. But we do believe that after the next quarter, we will be able to do that, to provide you with that. Moving on to grant revenue, our grant revenue totals $41.9 million for the quarter. Compared to the budget, grant revenues were down $58.2 million or 58.1%. And this was due to the timing of the receipt of the CARES Act revenue between fiscal year 20 and 21 that I told you about. By the end of October, TriMet will have drawn down all available funds from the CARES Act award. And this does not mean we will have spent it all. This means that we will have drawn it in-house. It is on deposit. We expect to consume the funds by the end of fiscal year 21. As for system operating expenses, we have first quarter are 17.4% under budget or $26.5 million. The reductions are mainly pandemic related. Key areas include lift and ATP expenses are down due to a significant drop in demand. Diesel fuel throughout the agency costs are down. Personnel services are down due in part to the hiring freeze, savings from service cuts offset by increases in personal protective equipment and supplies, and reductions in merchant banking fees due to reduced HOP credit card activity. Our operating project expenses include repairs and maintenance to existing infrastructure. The fiscal year 2021 budget has a total of $31.5 million in operating projects. The first quarter expenses incurred are $2.8 million. Of the budgeted $5.3 million for the quarter, variances are due primarily to timing of operating project expenses. The largest operating project spend is noted in safety and security in the amount of $1.4 million for bus operator protective barriers. Moving on, our general fund debt service activity through September 30th, TriMet deposits, including interest earnings to debt service funds, total $42.7 million, and principal and interest payments to bondholders totaled $25.9 million for the first quarter. TriMet's total net position at September 30th, 2020 is still a very robust $1.8 billion. This is a measure of the difference between total assets and deferred outflows, total liabilities and deferred inflows of resources of the agency. TriMet investment portfolio, the September investment portfolio report notes total unrestricted investments of $231.4 million and total restricted investments of $420.6 million. Both restricted and unrestricted investments plus the gain loss on any market value investment adjustments agrees to the total amount reported on the statement of net position for unrestricted plus restricted cash and investments. The restricted for TriMet capital projects of $332.7 million represents bond proceeds from various debt issues that is restricted for specific capital project spending. The $9.2 million of investments reflected for the PMLR project consists of funds restricted for use on that project. So I know this is a lot of information to just throw at you very quickly. I would invite you to take another look at the quarterly report and come back if you have any additional questions. If you have any questions currently, I'm happy to answer them.
Any questions or comments from the board? This is the information the Finance and Audit Committee did see earlier this morning, and we did have some questions. I don't know whether that committee, any of the committee members, want to comment on this also, but here it is.
I would be curious if the board is the frequency about right coming back quarterly. I wouldn't mind any feedback on that, President Warner.
Yeah, I've got feedback on that. Quarterly is, in my opinion, way too long in a world that seems to change so quickly. So it would be helpful to have something a little more frequently, even if as comprehensive. Clearly, the main thing is if there's any revelatory changes, any major shifts from the previous update. I think it's really any course correction information would be very useful. If the projections today are still viable a month from now, it's good to know.
Sure. Well, we do provide a monthly report on our financial condition, and it does have some information. What I can do is add to that and make sure that you have anything that is specifically worth noting regarding projections. For example, the way that we receive our payroll tax, it is simply too soon for us to know whether or not we are going to experience the significant downfall we're expecting. Some of the changes that have occurred recently regarding some of the cost projections have widened the gap that we're expecting in fiscal year 23, and we'll talk to you more about that at a later date. Happy to do that.
Thank you. That's precisely the kind of update that I think is meaningful to me personally, and I think to the board.
As just a follow up, Director Gonzalez, on your comment, which I think was excellent. Would you be comfortable if we planned on a quarterly update? In addition, we'll give you, as Dee's indicated, the monthly update with some suggestions. However, I'd like to suggest a second, an additional, that as part of the general manager's comments, if there's something structural that is, particularly we're in the early months of the year, it gets tighter as you go through and there are more things to unfold. If there's something structural, then I will commit to have that included specifically in the general manager report on the non-quarter months. Would something like that work for you to keep you apprised as well?
It helps, yes, and I think to just kind of recalibrate our course if we are indeed, if the gap is widening or if it's shrinking, that I think is very critical status update.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Thank you. Good feedback. Okay, Dee, thank you very much. We're going to move on now if we can. I'm just going to jump right into it for sake of time here. Sam DeSue is going to. Oh, sorry, Director White.
It's okay. I had my little hand thing up. Just
sorry.
Quick question. Oh no, you're fine. So obviously we're hearing a lot about the transportation measure that Metro is putting forward. It's been getting a lot of time on the airwaves, different opinions on the issue. Can you talk a little bit, and it could just be brief, or it could be maybe at the next board meeting when we know whether or not it'll pass, of just that impact on our agency, and particularly as it, obviously, right, relates to transit improvements.
Yeah, let me try and tackle this one. I'm just as, and this even came up today on the Finance and Audit Committee a bit, is knowing the ballot has dropped formally, and TriMet, we are not in a position to provide any comments for legal reasons that may sway or influence the ballot one way or the other. So I might take you up on your suggestion if I can give you an update at the next board meeting on the impacts to whether it be, it's going to be whatever one it's not, we won't spend time on. Whatever one it is, we'll probably spend time on. How, if you're okay with that, include in the next board meeting.
Yeah, that's fine. My second comment is I'm just continuing to think about the effects of COVID and how right nationally and locally it's just affecting so many folks who have already been facing many disparities. And I was wondering if we can maybe overlay some of the finance and audit reports or information with impacts on equity and impacts on diversity, because we do have a board adopted equity framework statement. And I think it would be really important, I think, for us as a board to see our financial statements, whether it's monthly or however we want to proceed with that, also sort of layering in a little bit of an equity analysis or that piece. I think it would be really important for us to also, again, remember to sort of center the work that we have done and really also focus on some of those equity impacts, if possible.
Yeah, I think maybe what we could do is I'll work with Dee and the team behind the scenes. Maybe in the financial updates, we'll actually maybe put a commentary section on equity in there, and then maybe we can kind of test it and see does that make sense? Is there enough in there? Is there too much in there? So let us maybe take a first cut on it for the next round, and like to solicit your comments as to is it meaningful?
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And if I could comment on it, I know that if you remember, we had a discussion at our, I guess, whatever we want to call it, retreat with David Bragdon and the other folks. And I think there was a lot of discussion about what kind of information the board needs, on a regular basis, financially and otherwise, to really feel good about what's happening and understand what's happening in the agency. And I know Director Bauman has had a conversation with Shelley and following up from that. And so I think all of this is a really good discussion. I want to make sure that we get the information we need as a board. I think that's kind of the discussion we have, but also not putting undue burdens on staff to just produce reports. So I think we need to be mindful as a board about what we actually think is important and what staff thinks we ought to have. It's important too. So I suspect this is going to evolve over the next few months as we go on here. So I know Lori, I don't know, Lori, if you have any comments on this item, but I think it's another bigger discussion.
Right. I do have a concern about overburdening the staff, but at the same time, we are in extraordinary times, and tracking the changes that are happening is important. One idea that I had would be to have a list provided for us of what are the reports that we receive regularly, just kind of a recap so that we understand what we're seeing, and that could help us then talk about what do we need anything different. And I guess the one graph that I've mentioned a couple times is the one that shows attendance among maintenance staff. And
oh yeah.
Shelley helped me understand why we need that. But these are the sort of things where I say, what? Okay, we're getting this why, and why? How does that help us understand the agency? And so I thought a first step would be to have a list of what are the regular reports that are prepared, and then maybe we could look a little harder at, do we need more? Do we need less? What's the reason for each one?
Yeah. Perhaps what I could do is Shelley, maybe as we put this list together, I think Director Bauman, as you've indicated, we will circulate that around to each person, and I'm going to ask Shelley to follow up with each of you. And if we think there's a bigger discussion needed, then I may actually suggest that we put this on either as a formal part of our briefing, or I'm not sure we'll have time in November for the board strategy session, because that's going to be about reimagining safety security primarily. But we'll figure out how we get to a broader connecting the whole board together if we think there's significant gaps that are worthy a wholesome more conversation, if the board's comfortable with that approach.
I think that sounds good.
Okay. Thank you. So thank you, Dee, very much. I am going to move ahead, if I may, and just remind everybody, you're still part of the general manager's update. And I'm going to turn over to Sam to see if you can just efficiently, he says, move through the quarterly performance update, talking about data that the board had interest in. So here's one of those examples right now. Over to you, Sam.
All right, thanks, Doug. Good morning, President Warner and board directors. This morning, we're going to present to you the second quarter 2020 system performance report highlights. And we're going to feature the months of April, May, and June of 2020. And what we're going to do is compare the months April, May, June 2020 to the same months of 2019's performance. The key highlights for this report are the continuation of our rail rule violations decreasing, and also our bus collision rate is one of the lowest in the last 5 years. So we'll talk about that. But also primary with this report here is this was the time frame that the COVID-19 pandemic was at its height. And we rerouted our service around civil unrest nightly after the George Floyd's death. The speed and scope of the pandemic posed extraordinary challenges for us, especially as we were educating our customers on the OHA guidelines for wearing a face mask and social distancing. Next slide. As you see here, we had a 7.4 percentage point increase for our bus on-time performance. The region, again, was under Governor Brown's stay-at-home orders, and there was less traffic on the road. We also had a slight increase on our on-time performance for MAX, but it was essential stable. Next slide. Looking at our West on-time performance, we had a slight increase of 1.8 percentage points. West on-time performance has recovered nicely after we've installed the positive train control work at the end of 2019. Next slide. Our fixed route bus complaints increased by 11.5 percentage points over 2019 due to COVID-19 public health guidelines, and that was requiring customers to wear masks, requiring customers to social distance, for us to continue to educate about the maximum social distancing vehicle numbers that we could put on the vehicles. We had some escalating anxieties, we had conflicts, and then lastly, we had the civil unrest with the nightly rerouting of our services after George Floyd death. We had 1,165 complaints from 5 million boardings. Compared to the second quarter of 2019, we had 1,799 complaints from 14.7 million boardings. Next slide. Our MAX light rail complaints have slightly increased due to COVID and also due to some of the civil unrest. Out of 3.3 million boardings, we had 88 complaints. So if you look across the quarter, there's 90 days in that quarter. So basically we were looking at one complaint per day on MAX. Next slide. Here, we continue to see a decrease in our rail rule violations by 62.6% rule violations per 1 million miles over quarter two 2019. And this is just great news. We've seen this steady decline over the last 12 months. And I really would like to congratulate our rail operators here, our training staff, our operation control center staff, and our management staff. Next slide. Also good news here in Lyft. We've seen a increase in our miles between road calls by 53.1%. And again, we're continuing to replace older vehicles, and it's led to improved performance. Next slide. Our fixed route mean distance between failure reporting is under review by our service performance and analysis team. We conducted an audit to review all documented maintenance incidents in FY20, and we found several discrepancies with our methodology that's being used. We had a different set of employees that were looking at things one way versus the other. So what we did is our team got together and we have reviewed the FY20 data, and we've made adjustments by our performance analysis team. So a revised reporting process will be implemented during the first quarter of 2021. But here, as you see on the graph here, our distance between failures is 34.5 percentage points, or either 10,115 miles between failures. And that's by our maintenance team being able to triage vehicles from the operation control center and also replacing those least reliable buses that are out there. During this time here, if you think about the April, May, June timeframe, we put in place a 20% service reduction that was in service. So we reduced our bus mileage over those 3 months by 1.2 miles over the quarter. One other note that I would like to bring forth here that I think is meaningful is that if you look at average MDBF compared to our peers, which is Los Angeles, King County, Denver, Salt Lake City, and San Diego, their MBDF is totaling about 11,000 miles between failures. So TriMet is right there. We're currently slightly below our peer agency, but we're there. Next slide. Our MAX MDBF has a modest increase of 13.2 percentage points, or 12,262 miles. This is due to fewer failures in our Type 1 doors, which are more prone to failures due to the age. And we are in that process of replacing and decommissioning all 26 of our Type 1 vehicles in the next 2 years. Also, we had a reduction in our propulsion system failures. So that means that more miles between failures brings us higher train reliability and on-time performance. Next slide. Here, great news. Our bus collisions have decreased by 44.4%. This is one of the lowest in 5 years. As I stated earlier, we had 158 collisions over 5.7 million miles for the second quarter of 2020. This decline here is also primarily due to decrease in mirror strikes and fixed objects. Again, less traffic on the road during this period of time due to the stay-at-home orders, but also want to congratulate our bus operators, our training staff, our supervision and management staffs here. Next slide. We've reduced our overall max rail collisions by 12.7 percentage points. Our overall rate remains low. We traveled 1 million miles in the second quarter with only 11 collisions, less than 1 collision per week for the quarter. Again, congratulations to all of our rail operators. Also, as I conclude the second quarter 2020 performance report, COVID-19 pandemic is a crisis unlike any other in recent time. The speed and scope of this virus pose extraordinary challenges for TriMet and the Portland region. But I would like to thank our employees and the leadership for recognizing the crisis and really begin to mount an agency response. We were and currently are providing essential and vital service to our customers in all 3 counties of the Portland region. And we're grateful for all of our employees that show up to work despite the risk and fears of this pandemic. Thank you for your time, board. Are there any questions?
I'm not seeing any hands raised. Does anybody want to have a question or comment for Sam or for Doug?
Sam, I think you dazzled them with the results. So
Okay.
I think we're going to declare victory. I do want to thank Sam for his leadership here in this tumultuous time. Having been a COO a few times in my life, they're not easy jobs, particularly in this industry. So Sam, thank you for what you're doing out there. And thanks to the team that's doing all the heavy lifting, not just our frontline operators, but all the planners, Steve Callis's and all these planners that spend an immense amount of time digging into this data. We've got a lot of great results here. There really are. Even if you factor out COVID, there are areas to work on. As the general manager, the one area that frankly we are not at industry standard in is our mean distance between failure, particularly on the rail side. We have a lot to do there, and that will come over time. We made progress, but that's one area that is still we're still under construction, if you will. So, but anyway, overall, I think agencies should be proud of what we're doing. So, thanks, Sam. Last, and backed by popular demand, Guy Ben, I want to give you an update with Bob Hastings, Lancers, to talk about an affordable housing transit-oriented development project that has been working on behind the scenes for quite some time. It's the current site of our Southeast Fuller Road park and ride lot along the Green Line. So I'm just going to turn it right over to you, folks. Bob, Lance, Guy.
Thank you, Doug. And President Warner, board directors, good morning. Today, on behalf of the TOD team, I'm going to present details on Fuller Station family housing. I'm joined by my colleagues Lance Owers, Director of Real Estate, and Bob Hastings, Agency Architect, both of whom have been deeply involved in this project from its inception, who will be available to answer questions at the end. We've 8 slides and 10 minutes, so we're going to get rolling, and we'll move on to the next slide, please. So what is Fuller Station Family Housing? Fuller Station Family Housing is a 100-unit new construction, 100% affordable housing project that would be built adjacent to TriMet, Fuller Road, Max Light Rail Station. It's going to be built on about 40% of the land area of the existing park and ride site and will comprise a 6-story building. In addition to providing much needed affordable housing, it's going to provide significant new amenities, including a new natural playground and land for a new east-west street that will connect the Fuller Road with the Max station. Next slide, please. Where is the building and how does it integrate with its surroundings? This slide shows the project labeled number 1 in the middle of this map. As you can see, the building itself is located on the west side of the park and ride site, with some dedicated parking between the building and the Max Light Rail Station. It sits on the southern half of the existing park and ride site and occupies about 40% of the current park and ride facility. Item label number 2 identifies the remaining park and ride facility. And so after development of the project, there will be approximately 300 spaces remaining at the Fuller Road Max station for car parking. Prior to the pandemic, as a point of reference, the average daily usage of the park and ride was about 100 spaces. Item number 3 identifies the actual Max Light Rail Station, which you can see lies in immediate proximity. Also, adjacent to the light rail and running parallel to the alignment is a multi-use path that connects Clackamas Town Centre with the neighbourhoods to the north. Item number 4 is shows the 2 streets that are going to be delivered by Clackamas County as a result, or partially as a result of this project. Most significantly, there's a new east-west street labeled D Street East-West, which is basically being facilitated by the project as TriMet will dedicate 50% of the land for this street. Clackamas is also proposing to build a new north-south D Street, which runs down the center of this graph. The total cost or the investment by Clackamas County in this new street infrastructure, which will improve accessibility to the Max station and create a new neighborhood center, is $3.3 million. What's important, I think, to note from the importance of this infrastructure is not only does it create new accessibility to the Max station, is it also unlocks 2 significant sites to the south of our park and ride facility. They are east and west of the northwest D Street, and to the east side, there is the Miller Fiberglass site, which is actually owned by Clackamas and will be marketed for sale later, probably early next year. And then there's a second site to the west. Finally, on this plan, you can see there is the Johnson Creek Shopping Center, which provides immediate amenity. And there are retailers represented here of Best Buy, Dick's Sporting Goods, PetSmart, as well as numerous restaurants and other facilities. Next slide, please. So what about the project itself? This slide shows the ground floor plan of the project and identifies both the residential units at ground floor level marked in blue, as well as many of the key amenities which are marked in yellow. There are, from an amenity perspective, there will be 2 community rooms, computer lab, residence kitchen, bike room with wash station, a natural playground, laundry room, community garden beds, as well as package lockers and year-round landscaping. From a sustainability perspective, the building will basically be constructed using sustainable or long-lasting materials. Each apartment will have Energy Star appliances to minimize or be most efficient with electricity uses. And each apartment will have individualized heating and cooling controls, which operate via efficient heat pumps, which are in line with best-in-class appliances. The next slide, please. Who is the project going to serve? So really, one of the major appeals for this project is not only does it unlock, significant amount of development land adjacent to our Max Light rail station, is that it's an 100% affordable housing project, which is targeted at homeless families and individuals, young adults exiting the foster care system, and large families with children. The unit mix, as you can see from this slide, consists mostly of 2- and 3-bedroom units. The average AMI that will be served, if you average out all these numbers, is a 50% AMI. So it's very much serving underprivileged and needy families. There will be 25, or the developer has applied for 25 project-based Section 8 vouchers to support new families moving into the facility. And there will be resident services provided by Join, who are a Portland-based homeless service and retention organization, and Dev Northwest, who is a community group and counseling agency that's piloted programs of helping youth that are exiting or have exited foster care and moving into their own housing. Next slide, please. The development team. So this slide really outlines who the key the members of the development team are, who've helped imagine and deliver this or conceptualize and promote this project. The development lead is Anna Geller of Geller Silvers Associates, and she has a track record of developing and owning affordable housing projects in the Clackamas region. And she currently has 3 other projects within walking distance of the Green Max line. So well proven to deliver and operate in this neighborhood. Guardian Real Estate Services are a vertically integrated real estate development, ownership, and operating company based in Portland with a significant portfolio against the Pacific Northwest. They have, they're providing the majority of the financial firepower and underwriting this, and will basically help deliver, make sure that this project is delivered and operates, for the long-term future. The architect is another Portland company, Waterleaf Architecture. The principal that's been working on this project is Stephen Lapp, and they have been, Waterleaf has been operating in the Portland area for 60 years. And other groups, the project manager, BC Group, 17-year history, RH Construction, a very well-known construction group with 40 years of operating experience in the Portland area. So a very experienced and diverse local team capable of delivering and operating this project. Next slide, please. It would be amiss, to present this project and not talk about the project economics. These 2 charts at the top show the uses of funds for the project, and the bottom chart shows the sources of funds. In total, the project cost is basically a $47.2 million project, all costs included, so land, construction, financing fees, etc. The majority of the costs, as you can see, represent hard costs, and for non-development individuals, hard costs are really the construction costs, cost of labor and materials to deliver the building. And that is a sum of around 30.6 million, which is very much in line with delivering a project of this size and scope. If you look at the cost per unit, the cost per unit all in is around $472,000 per unit, which again, having looked at comparable projects across the Pacific Northwest, across the Portland area, is very much in line with unit costs. Project funding, The development team has worked exceptionally hard, as you can see from the second chart, to basically secure all the project funding that is needed to deliver this project. And I think what's key to note here is that there are 8 different funding sources that that the development team has basically managed to secure and coordinate to deliver the project. The various elements, I'll just talk about the 3 largest ones. The low-income housing tax credits is a well-established federal program that is effectively equity. That is around $17 million worth of money. The developer has secured permanent debt from a well-known national bank. That's $15 million. And then there is, important to note, there is also funding support from the Metro Housing Bonds, which has been arranged through the Housing Authority of Clackamas County. That's $10 million worth of funding, along with other grants. Home Grant is the Clackamas County program. OHCS, Oregon Housing and Community Services Weatherization Grants, and also the Metro TOD grant money. Next slide, please. And so finally, just to wrap up, the development timetable, we are, this graph says October to have binding contracts signed. We have had a contract in place and effectively we are just dotting I's and crossing T's. And if it's not signed this week, it will be signed, we hope, in the next 2 to 3 weeks. The program, with all the various public subsidy and various other funding efforts, the program, we are targeting a closing date in late December, which will allow construction basically to sort of start in the spring with a delivery timetable for full 2020. It's an 18-month build program, so full 2022 delivery. So that's the project in a nutshell. I'm conscious we've run through it very quickly, but we'd welcome any questions from the board and also receive your comments. Thank you very much.
Great description of the project. The board have some thoughts and comments?
Yes, I have a couple of questions. On the northwest corner of the project, there looked like there was an overpass. Is that for pedestrian traffic to crossing Southeast Fuller?
No, there is not a. There is not a. I think it may just be marking on the map. Fuller Road is a relatively busy road, but there is no overpass. There are pedestrian crossings on Fuller Road that will connect it with the Johnson Creek Shopping Center.
Yeah, I just think it'd be a good idea to maybe consider that, having an overpass for pedestrian traffic, so there's provide safety as well as not obscuring the traffic that's going up and down Southeast Fuller. I had another question. Join and Dev Northwest are going to be providing services, I presume wraparound services for the residents there, those that are homeless, those are coming from foster care. I guess my question is, what kind of, track record and what kind of contract are they providing, or are they going to be signing on to? I guess because I would look at a contract that is results driven. And when I say results driven, I look like a model where folks that are living in affordable housing are given some kind of opportunities and education, so that there's no second generation affordable housing out of those same families. And so that's what the reason I say results driven. And I don't know what that would necessarily look like, but I know what the outcome, the expectations would be. And I'd like to know, what is TriMet's role after development of this project?
Yeah, I'm going to address your last question first. So TriMet's role post the development of this project, we are selling the land to the developer. And so we will not have a role in the operation of the affordable housing project for once the land is sold. We are one of the reasons we like this project is it is bringing density. And it's unusual to have a 6-story building in this neighborhood around our light rail station. And as I said, it unlocks the sites to the south. We also think that in time, given the low usage, certainly the current low usage of our park and ride site, that it will create an opportunity for further development on the remainder of the park and ride site. We see it as a bonus to TriMet because it's going to deliver basically transit ridership to our system, and it creates it's an efficient use of land in and around our transit system, in and around our transit infrastructure. It's as you could see from the unit mix. The units cater to a variety of income, to the very low income, which is 30%, to low income, which is 60%. And to your comments about second generation affordable housing, residents living, sort of going to being second generation homeless, the GSA is a very strong believer in providing a diverse income level and creating that environment where people can aspire to believe and basically improve their personal situations. With regards to the exact nature of the contract with Join and Development Northwest, I don't know the precise nature, but what I do know is that Dev Northwest has funding from Clackamas County to serve youth within the county, and that 25% of the units have been identified for Dev Northwest, and I think also Join. So for individuals that are coming through their programs, that makes sense. More information to
Thank you very much. Can you add something to add to that, Bob? I'm sorry. Thank you very much for that. I get concerned about, just our role, I guess, and maybe something we need to look at as a board, look at looking forward in regards to our responsibilities, not just to provide the blueprint, but at the same time provide a floor plan, if you will, as to what success is going to look like in regard to this development. Because I get concerned sometimes, we have a development initially and it looks great on paper. It looks great as a blueprint. But 10 or 15 years down the road, 20 years down the road, it kind of falls off. And I don't want to look back and say, yes, we developed this or we provided this facility and made it happen, and it's tied to TriMet, but it's not what we intended. And so I think that perhaps there's some more work that we need to do in regards to the commitment that we receive from those that are going to be using this property after it's turned over.
One thing I would comment to that is that separate to this project and part of our TOD guidelines is that we are going through a system-wide TOD planning effort. And so we actually have money from ODOT through a Transport Growth Management grant. And Fuller Road Station is one potential area where we can do a wider station area planning. And it may well be appropriate, given that Clackamas, whose objective is to provide a community appropriate, residential-led development on the Miller fiberglass site, is going to be looking at creating a new community. And if when we looked at Gala Silvis as a potential developer for this site, or they came to us with their ideas for the site, we looked at their track record and we like what they've done in the past and their performance. And yes, nothing is certain for the future, but I think we have a strong degree of confidence that this is going to be a very good project.
Director Edwards, let us come back to you on that once we factor this into some of the other work we're doing, if you're okay with that.
Yes, I'm okay with that. I'm concerned in today's environment, the environment we've had of late,
Yeah.
that we were more concerned about money aspect of it and providing a venue rather than making sure that we provide some actionable efforts with that venue to make it successful.
Yeah, and I also think we have to tie these conversations into our municipal partners, so we can't just do these in isolation. So I think we, in some regards, can be a catalyst for some of these conversations, and they may vary by municipality and partnership. But I think it's worth us putting under the microscope a little bit further. So thanks for that suggestion.
Yes, thank you very much.
Director Way, I think you had your hand up first.
I do. I really appreciate this discussion and presentation, and also thank you so much, Director Edwards, for asking. I think some of those questions that I think we still have to discuss and navigate as an agency. I think overall, as someone who is from a resident of Clackamas County, I actually go over to that Fuller Road area and then around 82nd and Audie quite frequently, and I am just very happy to see this partnership really coming into fruition. There is definitely an affordable housing crisis everywhere, but particularly in Clackamas County, and I've seen entire families living in cars and just trying to get their basic needs met. So I think that while this isn't going to solve all of the problems, I think this is definitely one solution that I feel very proud of our agency, TriMet, for being really, I think, intentional about the TOD work and just creating more stable housing for some of the most vulnerable folks in our communities. A question that I have is just around, again, this goes back to, I guess, the frequency of reporting and letting the board know just some of the key developments and updates between now and the completion of this project. I guess, when can we reasonably expect another update around this particular project?
Yeah, absolutely. So within the guidelines that we discussed in April, May, we committed to quarterly updates to the board. So I think this update, we focused very much on this Fuller Road Station project. We will be very happy to report back again, in the next quarter. So that'll be January, with an update as to where we stand. Hopefully, we will have executed the transaction and construction will be in process. And then we can, obviously update the board quarterly thereafter on this and other projects as needed.
All right, thank you. This is my last comment. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to suggest, as part of our updates, I think I want to make sure as we not only talk about, I'll call the opportunities per site, but also making sure that we keep focused also on the strategy of the network in TOD and the work that's needed. So there's the tactics and the strategy, making sure that we bring back to the board updates on how we're looking at our inventory, our network, et cetera, because each of these are very different. And sometimes the deals are on, they're off, depends on your partnerships, right? And they never go to according to a hard timeline. But I want to make sure we focus on strategy as well as the deal of the day, if you will.
Thank you. I think my last comment would be, I think I would also echo, the comment that Director Edwards had around the social services piece and the education to the renters, because I think that we are, as an agency, I think we're doing something that is quite progressive, in terms of having a pretty robust TOD framework. And I think that, if we have a better sense of, okay, these are the services that are being provided, I think we could be a really great leader, in terms of developing TOD, that other parts of the state can either replicate or nationally groups can look to us. And I do believe that, obviously because we have board members who come from, serving youth or families or direct services, I think we do have a particular expertise an interest in also seeing how, again, how some of those services can affect, other determinants of health. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Director Stovall, I think you were next.
Thank you, Guy, for the presentation. Of course, my question centers around the cost per unit. If I remember correctly, we are just north of 400,000. Was that correct? 430.
472.
472. So quite a bit higher. And you said that that's in line with kind of what we see here, kind of on the West Coast of construction costs. Although most of the stuff, I actually sit on the Community Development and Housing Subcommittee here in Gresham. We just went through the process of looking at kind of the building of some affordable housing units based on the Metro bond, and the numbers I was seeing, from a per unit cost, center more around the 250,000. Am I just way off? Is there something that I'm missing? Almost, just south of $500,000 a unit seems high.
No, you're not way off. So there's the cost that I quoted is an all-in cost. So that includes all the land fees, financing, and other ancillary costs. Where I think the number that if we look at our hard costs, construction costs per unit, this project represents, that's around 300,000. It's around 300,000 per unit. Where things get difficult to compare is that this project is a little bit atypical in that it has a high proportion of 2 and 3 bed units, which are larger, that are more cost effective. So it's very hard. I mean, I struggle with this problem myself, regularly, and we were looking at the same metrics on on the Hollywood Transit Center redevelopment, and we did quite a lot of research looking at the sort of the ranges that exist, and both this project and Hollywood were falling within the range of cost per unit, either on a construction basis or on an all-in cost. I'm happy to. What I could do is I can probably find the data that we have. It actually came from Metro, and share that with you with those costs.
That would be extremely helpful. I would actually love to see that. Kind of that data and that cost comparison information for sure.
Right.
Director Gonzalez.
Trying to unmute myself. I cannot.
You're successful.
I think we're both trying to unmute me at the same time is what's happening. Thank you. Thank you for those comments, Director Stovall. I wanted to jump in on the heels of those comments. I have some clarification questions that I'll save if the phone could stop ringing. And I actually wanted to just jump into the comment of cost. And I think this is a recommendation for the TOD team as you present these sorts of cost numbers to us. It's very helpful to provide a number that normalizes us across the other sort of housing portfolio for affordable housing, where you do take out all of those infrastructure costs, street improvements, and even some of the amenities. I think if we could have an apples to apples number per unit cost for a comparable set of conditions, that helps us kind of see where we're tracking. But it also helps to give us the number per unit cost once you factor in the infrastructure improvements and the amenities. It's fantastic to hear this TOD project includes things like community gardens and bicycle lockers. These are things that, and even package lockers, these are fantastic amenities that clearly add to the incremental upfront cost of the project, perhaps offsetting in other areas. But these are things that will help us begin to compare across TOD projects that might have that similar level of amenities. And this is just a way to help inform us as the board and again, elevate the conversation about TOD investment. That's going to be really helpful for us beyond just the TriMet agency, but for the national TOD conversation. Now, this leads me to my question. One question is around the cost per unit, the 472K all in. I'm guessing includes the element of land cost, and I know that TriMet was one piece of that puzzle. I hear that the TriMet role that I've heard so far is that TriMet is has been involved in selling the land. I'd love a little bit more explicit description of what TriMet's role is in everything leading up to the occupancy of the project. So is there anything beyond selling land here? I'm curious if you could speak to what the process needed to be for setting the price of that land, because I think there's an opportunity for us to learn a little bit about what drives the setting of that price, because it does factor into this overall cost of per unit. And I'd love to know if there's anything beyond the selling of the land that TriMet is doing as part of this development. Are we investing? Are we an investment partner in any way? Are we investing in any efforts around the entitlements and permitting process? Or are we investing in the Metro funds for the station's improvements? Are there any infrastructure investments, that upgrades to existing infrastructure that we're going to be doing directly as a result of this development? Those sorts of things would just help kind of to understand what it is our role is in this one, because I know it will shift from one project to the other. Everyone will be structured differently, and our stake in that partnership will look a little different. So it'd be nice to know sort of how you present what our role and our stake is in this particular instance. And then, and final question, this one I think really helps across project presentations, is the unit mix. What were the driving factors in this specific project that drove the final unit mix? It's great to hear we got 100% affordable, but where did this unit mix come from? Was this driven by TriMet? Was this a Clackamas County driving decision, or did it come from another set of factors? Those sorts of things help, again, elevate the conversation about how we arrive at these key decision points in the project. Thank you. This is a great first round. I'm really glad to see that we've got a project going into the books.
Great, thank you. Jeff, could you just go back one slide, please? Yeah, so I wanted to go back to this slide, just revisit this. From the total costs of 47.2, the site and land improvements were 3%. That's actually a figure of 1.2 million. So Director Gonzalez, to address your first question, how did TriMet come to a cost of the land? And the answer is that we actually received an unsolicited approach from the developer to buy the land, and we took their offer, and basically we had a third-party independent appraisal for the land, which we're required to do under our unsolicited offer or unsolicited bid approach, and that valued the land at $1.2 million. Now, this project has actually been in the pipes since 2017, and it's been a fairly long road to get to where we are today, with a lot of work and investment by the developer, by the TriMet team. During the the negotiation of the purchase and sale agreement sort of back in 2017, 2018, and during the site due diligence that the buyer was conducting, we established that actually where Clackamas County, from a permitting perspective, wanted the building to be developed, which is fronting Fuller Road, also sits on top of the existing stormwater facility that services the park and ride. So that was not known to either the appraiser or the developer, or even the TriMet staff when the offer was first made. So we then went through a process of basically accounting for that and identifying a solution. And so TriMet's commitment to sort of enable this project to go forward was to basically to make an arrangement with the developer where they will deliver a new stormwater facility that services the remaining park and ride. So that will be located on our park and ride site, and they will remove the existing, they will decommission the existing stormwater facility. They'll build a new one for their building, and the land price. Consequently, we had the land reappraised. And the cost of all that work is in the region of $750,000. So it's a significant endeavor. So we've been collaborative to promote the project from the get-go. I think for other uses, you could argue that the land maybe, it's a difficult one because you've got sort of atypical circumstances. With regards to our role with sort of going forward, is the developer is buying the project site, and they will have fee ownership of that site and full control of that site. We are selling it to them on the basis of their development plans. But in order for that development to occur and for Clackamas County to approve it, it requires TriMet to dedicate a strip of land immediately to the south, which is currently our park and ride, that will form that east-west D Street. And so, we will retain ownership of that land. It will be subject to a permanent right of way. We have basically worked with the FTA, who have an interest in the land, because this was all originally acquired as part of the Green Line, I-205 Max Light Rail projects. And so we've basically been sort of identifying solutions to make it happen. And the reason we want to do that is because it's going to catalyze other projects in the neighborhood that we talked about. We think there will be easements across the project site, which will allow individuals and vehicles to access our park and ride, and that in years to come we anticipate could become a dedicated street in Clackamas, and then create sort of a new community, a town centre around the light rail station. So we're by no means completely passive from this point onwards, but we are passive as it comes to the development site. We don't have control over that. We don't have a financial interest in that going forward, and the developer is responsible and liable for everything to do with that site. And the final point, your question about unit mix and who determined it. It was determined effectively by the developer, but the developer doesn't do just because it fancies doing a majority of 2 and 3 beds. The developer, is an established operator of affordable housing in Clackamas County. They know what the needs are, and they work with Group Join and Dev Northwest. And in order to secure the metro funding and the various other forms of subsidy that this project needs to get built, it looks to supply the affordable housing that they want to supply. So, if this was a more urban project, closer to downtown Portland, for instance, it's likely that there will be a higher proportion of 1-beds and studios and smaller units, which would bring down the unit per cost or the cost per unit. So the developer is sort of, TriMet hasn't had influenced that decision. We're not we need to leave it to the experts in terms of determining what's needed from an affordable housing perspective. If that makes sense. So I hope I've answered your questions. I'm happy to take it offline or answer further as appropriate.
Thank you for sharing that. You did answer my questions.
Any other questions from the board? Seeing none, I guess I just want to say congratulations to the team. This is a great project. I think for a number of reasons, especially the mix of housing. I'd really congratulate everybody on pulling that off and actually having the intestinal fortitude, frankly, to pull it off, because it is a lot more expensive per unit. And I just want to also acknowledge the Metro Housing Bonds, what a big help this is in terms of pulling a project like this together, because I've had the fun of trying to help people put together these kind of projects, and this is tough. And so you guys again pulled off a really good one here, and the team is a good one. And so I'm looking forward to the groundbreaking, and I want to be there. So again, thanks.
I would like to say kudos to the team as well. And can we take a break?
Yes, thank you. So, Doug, I think, are you done with your general manager's report?
I am so done.
Yeah, I think that what I'm hearing is from a number of comments that we need a break. So how about, is 10 minutes adequate, folks?
Yes.
Okay, so why don't we come back about 11:47 or so and start back up, and we'll get through the rest of the agenda. Thank you. Thanks again, you guys. Great work. So starting where we left off, the next item on the agenda is our consent agenda. And as I always say, the items appearing on the consent agenda are considered to be routine and may be approved by a single motion by the board, and the board can remove any item from the consent agenda if they want to talk about it. I would point out we only have one agenda item, which is the approval of the board meeting minutes for the meeting of September 23rd, 2020. Has the board had a chance to look at those minutes? If so, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved. This is Travis.
So moved.
Okay.
And second, Linda.
All right, good. I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, that all those in favor of the motion to approve the consent agenda signify by saying aye.
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 Is there any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion is approved unanimously. All right, well, let's move on then to the resolutions, and we have 4 of them today. The first resolution is Resolution 20-10-39, which is authorizing submission of 10 grant applications to the Federal Transit Administration for fiscal year 2021 federal formula and discretionary funds. Mr. General Manager.
Thank you very much, Mr. Board President, members of the board. Sir, your approval is requested on this today, really as part of TriMet's annual process to seek 2 parts, one for federal formula and secondly for our discretionary funds. These are very foundational, integral part of our whole budget. The request is for just under $114 million in FY21 federal funds alone. They fall into really 3 categories. One is debt service. The second category is for the maintenance and grant specific for specific purpose, such as mobility programs for seniors, people with disabilities, and then development of our transit oriented development program. You saw an example of that just a few minutes ago, as well as investments in our integrated mobility. The whole list of the grants that we apply for, as well as the amounts and the match requirements, they're in your packet already today, or they should be. And there are 3 comments I wanted to point out that that were received as part of the public period. So hopefully those are available to you as well. In the case, these grants, they're essential for us for our debt service, our number of maintenance, operational mobility improvement projects, and your approval is recommended here. And I'm not sure if Nancy or Dee has any comments to add.
Nancy is up on this one.
Hi, thanks everyone. Yeah, as Doug has outlined, there are 10 grant applications that we're making. On your list, I just want to point out that the grant receipts pledged to debt service, while there's 2 items listed, that's actually 1 grant that has sources of funding. These grants are already included in the fiscal year 2021 budget document. And this presentation to you today is part of our documentation. It's an element that we are audited on, and our triennial review is coming up here after the first of the year. So this demonstrates our compliance with requirements to be transparent and accountable. And I'm happy to answer any questions if there's a specific question about any of the grants.
Have any questions from the board members? I had one question, Nancy. I see the testimony, the position by the Cascade Policy Institute opposing this federal grant request, which appears to be the entire grant request, but they're making reference to a program where we propose spending 4.2 million on zero emission battery electric buses. Which line item or grant is that included in?
Okay, so if you look at the listing on the second page, grants designated for specific purposes. Let's see, we've got included in there. Hold on, let me just look through this really quick here.
I assume it must be part of one of those larger.
It's under, so if you look at our federal formula grants, the third one down, we've got 3.43 million for bus and bus facilities. We've got buses in there. We've also have additional funds within the STBG for purchase of the fixed route buses. That's item 4 on that for 1.6 million. So I believe that those are the two that they're referring to.
Okay.
We can't see those under this format.
Oh.
Do you have the resolution in front of you?
Yeah, I think
but the only thing I have is the resolution, and I have all 4 resolutions in front of me, but I don't have the documentation that goes along with those. We can't see it. We can't see it under this format.
You can't see it on this page. It's showing. No. I'm looking at my laptop that has the iPad that shows it on. So I do see that.
Jeff, are you able to scroll down to the resolution?
Yeah, is this page 31?
It should be the first resolution after the minutes. Keep going.
Okay.
Yeah, Keith, what I'm doing is toggling back and forth to what is.
So just go to the next page.
Our share drive.
That's it, though. You've got it right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So, yeah, and that's in the second section under the formula grants, items 3 and 4.
And that helps. And the reason I ask, I just want to know where it was for everybody to understand that. I do not agree with Cascade Policy Institute's recommendation that this should be opposed or pulled out of this. So I just wanted to make sure everybody knew where it was, and because it wasn't clear to me what they were actually saying. So thank you for that, Nancy.
You're welcome. Is there any other questions?
I do not see any other questions. Then is the board ready to offer a motion to approve resolution 20-10-39?
So moved.
Linda. Oh, I'm sorry, Director Gonzalez, you have a question?
Yeah, sorry about that.
Well, hold on for the motion for a minute.
We do have the motion.
Who made the motion?
Linda did.
Okay. So, was there a second also?
I'll go ahead and second so that we can get to the discussion.
Okay.
So second from Travis.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Now let's get back to the question. Any further questions? Director Gonzalez.
Thank you. I was curious. Most of these grants here look like they are part of broader programs, sustaining programs. Are any of these grants new grants or something that is being launched for the first time through this grant?
So Director Gonzalez, if you look at the listing that we have on there, the ones that I would say are newer are the under the grants designated for specific purposes, where you have the Enhanced Mobility, 5310, and the 5312, Innovations in Transit Public Safety.
Jeff, scroll down a bit. Okay.
Within that section showing grants designated to specific programs.
Mm-hmm.
Item number 5, the Innovations in Public Transit Safety.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then the one directly above that, the pilot program for transit-oriented development. So those would be the ones that are newer.
Thank you.
Sorry, I went quickly. Are there other questions or comments on this item before we vote? Okay, hearing none then, I will assume we're ready to vote. All those in favor of then the motion to approve Resolution 20-10-39, please signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion is approved unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you for answering the questions. Move on to the next resolution, which is Resolution 20-10-40, which is to approve TriMet's Agency Safety Plan, ASP it's called, as required by the Federal Transit Administration. Mr. General Manager, do you want to tee this one up for us?
You bet. And we also got Marla Blagg and Frank Castellone here to answer any technical questions on this. But this is an important program that's taken a lot of work to put in place. This is really a cornerstone that could potentially jeopardize other future FDA funding should this not be approved. The Agency Safety Plan, I'm going to refer to as ASP here, it includes a safety management policy, a risk management process, a safety assurance process, and really a framework for safety training and how we communicate. So the underpinning of this, and I've worked with these for a lot of years, is it's a cultural document around safety. And as this agency continues to build its muscle on the safety side, I think it's a really, really important document, and I'm hoping the board has had a chance to review it all. This does meet all of the FTA requirements, and it's been reviewed by every member of the leadership team, and you can see even the leadership team, myself included, have signed that document. It's very important that we all sign it. The activities described here within the plan, they're integrated they unbundle out of the policy piece and integrate into our day-to-day activities and our subsidiary budget conversations and also our operating policy. So it really is expansive in its nature. And in adherence to this is really, really important, not only at the federal level, but with our regional partners, the oversight at ODOT, particularly on the rail side. So your approval is recommended, and we want to thank Marla and Frank and many others for a lot of complex work going into putting this in place. So happy to answer questions.
I'll do a pop quiz with the board on how many have read the whatever it was 60 pages of this document. It's a very complete safety plan. Does the board have any questions or comments for Doug or the staff on this one?
I have some questions.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, this is a very dense report that thank you, team, for just putting it together and providing some of your analysis. Just one of my first questions is, has there been any changes that is significant from the FTA? Any specific changes that we should be aware of as a board? So
do you want to take that, Marla, or Frank?
Hey, good morning, board members. Frank Castellone, Director of TriMet System Safety. And to very broadly answer your question, which is an excellent question, there are a lot of changes that are noted by FTA regulation that are represented in the body of this document. So yes, it does equal out to mean many changes for us, but they're not so much changes in how we function. It just goes, the past, the way our system safety program plan went was very prescriptive, and this is more of a hazard-based plan. So the expectation of FTA and state safety oversight is a lot of our system safety related hazards are identified through this process noted in this plan. So it's kind of a more generalized way to deal with system safety, but the intent is to address the culture related to safety of the agency as well.
Thank you. And just one other question is the community feedback or the community engagement process. I know that there was, I think in the last long legislative session, there was a bill that passed around TriMet forming a security committee to look at different incidents, accidents in particular. There was a woman that came forward with a personal story of losing her son. I don't know if folks remember that. I am really bad with remembering what that bill number was, but
it's the Crash Advisory Committee, I think you're referring to.
Yes, thank you so much, Doug. I'm just wondering if how that committee and that legislation, does that impact this work? If you can sort of comment on that.
One of the things I can add, this is Linda, I'm the board representative on the Crash Advisory Committee, and I was actually at the conclusion of this meeting going to ask that I be given the opportunity to give a committee report at our December meeting because we have started meeting. It doesn't bode requiring regular monthly reports because we really only meet a couple times a year, although recently we've been meeting a lot. But it's a Crash Advisory Committee, and yes, I mean, I could go into great detail right now, but I won't. But yes, we look at this, we analyze, the agency's response, all of the agencies that are involved in that TriMet has to report to whenever there is and they call it a crash. We may refer to it as a collision. And so it's, I'm just one of several community members that are involved representing TriMet and quite frankly, Kathy, I am absolutely in awe of all of the regulatory bodies that have their hand in TriMet in relationship to making sure our I's are dotted and T's crossed and every possible aspect is considered when there is a crash, regardless of whether a life has been impacted by it.
Great. Thank you so much, Director Simmons. And yes, that was the committee that I was referring to. I just wanted to bring that up because I remember that being a lot of testimony was being provided to the board, and there was some interest in the oversight and the implementation of that work. So thank you so much for those are all the questions I have.
Other questions or comments for Doug or the staff?
Yes, I had a question for the staff, and this is in regards to the latest of 2020 with both a pandemic as well as safety and security, personal safety being so intricately linked to the experiences that we're having around George Floyd and Black Lives Matter. In what ways have either of those two things this year changed the scope of the work of this plan, or any of the existing practices? Has that materially done anything significant in your opinion, based on the way the plan was structured before? Sounds like it was a very different process to go more threat or focused than prescriptive. So I wonder if these specific threats have done anything to be addressed.
So excellent question. Let me see if I can answer it and kind of put it into framework. So this document embodies the system safety, the safety of the system. So whether it's the light rail vehicles, the alignment, our employees, this program is more centered toward how the system functions, identifying hazards, putting in appropriate mitigations, and the same thing is true for the employee involvement. When it comes to the security side, the only element that this program really touches is, and you made mention of it, is something along the lines of threat and vulnerability assessment. Whenever we go to build a new project or whenever we go to upgrade a project, this plan would come into place and put forth the requirement, which is driven by FTA for threat and vulnerability assessment. So even though current events within our society may impact something like station safety, safety of light rail vehicles, unless we were going to make design a new thing, build a new thing, integrate a new system into place, then this plan wouldn't necessarily address that. But if there was some hazard, continual hazard, let's say we needed to install, platform screen doors, even though we have an open system, giving an example, then this plan would come into place and require us to do a threat and vulnerability assessment along with a hazard assessment. So that's how this ties into that specifically.
Thank you. So like the threat of, as we've seen in the past, the system being a place where one's personal safety is threatened by another person on the system, those are not within the purview of this particular plan. Is that, am I?
Yes, sir, that's correct. It's more along the lines of systemic hazards or something, trespassing, people trying to put, again, examples, explosive device in the system. This plan and the process in it address it. But the day-to-day crime and things like that, that's represented in another subsection of this.
Thank you.
More physical property, not personnel.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Other questions for staff or Doug? So Doug, this is, I'm getting a question I have. This is obviously something we need to approve and get to them so we can continue to receive federal funds, correct?
Correct. So yeah, this is a requirement. It's in definitely our interest to do so. I think to the other director's question, there are a lot of technical changes embedded in here. The average person, myself included, wouldn't see unless you spent time working on this stuff. So it is a requirement, and it's also good practice that the board be signing off to what management's actually undertaking. So we need to connect ourselves from the board all the way down through how we execute at ground level. So that is the best practice. So that's part of the recommendation for you today.
Good, thank you. So I believe we had a motion and a second on the table, correct?
Correct.
All right. Is there further discussion on this item? Seeing none and hearing none, I'm going to call the question. All those then in favor of the motion to approve resolution number 20-10-40, please signify by saying aye.
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 Mr. Board Chair?
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I do not have a motion for this.
Well, I thought we had a motion on this one.
No, that was the previous resolution.
Okay, see, well, that's why I asked. Thank you very much. So then could I have a motion to approve resolution number 20-10-40?
So moved.
I have a motion by Keith. Is there a second?
Second, Linda.
So no, I do believe we do have the motion on this one.
That's why I thought, Travis, you made the motion. I thought.
So no.
No, Linda made the motion.
Linda made the motion, and
That's right.
I made the second because we stopped because we were right in the middle of asking the Ozzy was right in the middle of asking the question, but we had already gotten the motion. So no, there is a motion on this.
There is a motion.
All right. So I was correct.
Technically, the motion just passed because we just voted on it. But yes, no. Director Simmons made the motion, and Stovall made the second. I actually made the motion on the first resolution, and someone else made the second. So I made the second on this resolution.
Right. All right. So I think we had a motion and a second, and I believe we just took a vote. I didn't ask if there was anybody who was opposed to the motion to approve this resolution. Is there any abstentions? If not, then what I say is this motion has been approved unanimously. Are you all right with that, Kimberly?
you.
Okay, good. Thank you. Well, let's move on then. We'll declare victory here and move on to the next resolution, which is Resolution 20-10-41, which is authorizing a contract with Stacy and Whitbeck, Inc. for the Ruby Junction Expansion Civil and Systems Project. Mr. General Manager, back to you.
Very much, Mr. Board President. So this project will provide additional storage tracks where our first generation or our type 1 vehicles, the new ones, the old ones leaving are the type 1s, the type 6s are arriving. So we have 26 of these type 1 vehicles out there now. They're the ones that are not ADA compliant that you have to step onto if you can visualize when you've ridden the MAX system. They were going to be in a process of decommissioning. This will allow us space for the new type 6 vehicles that are already been authorized by this board. They're in production right now and allow for future expansion of the LRV fleet. It will also mitigate some of our operational pullout issues in our morning when we launch service. Pullout sort of a railway term or bus term. It'll also help us with our on-time performance and the fundamental reliability getting out of Ruby Junction. Also a lot of complex and specialized work here. So we used a two-step process to identify the contractor. The first part of our step, we received 2 bidders. However, both exceeded the construction budget and the cost estimate. So the team, I think, and rightfully so, they went back and adjusted the scope and the project and then reissued the bid. Stacy and Whitbeck was the only firm to respond. And following a full analysis, the bid price was determined to be, our team felt, was fair and reasonable. The maximum amount of the contract here is $6.1 million, and it is included in the fiscal year, this current fiscal year 21 and 22's proposed capital plan. Stacy Whitbeck, they do intend to use DBE subcontract for about 12% of the work, and we'll work with them to see if we can actually push that even further if there's additional opportunities out there with the DBE firms. So based on the above and the circumstances we've got in a pretty limited marketplace, your recommendation, I hope you'll take my recommendation for approval of the resolution. So thank you. Steve Witter, did I miss anything that you wanted to comment on, by the way?
I think he must have covered it. So any questions or comments for Doug or staff on this item? I'm not hearing or seeing anything. Then is there a motion to approve resolution number 20-10-41?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second, Travis.
Thank you. All right. Is there any further discussion on this item?
Thanks
Hearing
for the
none, I'll call.
rundown.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, just wanted to thank Manager Kelsey for the rundown. I was curious about how we landed with 1 bidder in the end, so I appreciate that.
Okay. All right then. I'm going to call the question. All those then in favor of the motion to approve resolution number 20-10-41, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion is approved unanimously. Thank you very much. Move on to the last resolution then, which is resolution number 20-10-42, which is authorizing a modification to the contract with Stellar J Corporation for the Ruby Junction Shop Modifications Project. Mr. General Manager.
Thank you very much, Mr. Board President. So this resolution is also related to Ruby Junction. It is a modification, as you've indicated, with Stellar J's contract. They're the contractor for the shop modification, which will prepare Ruby to maintain the 5 newest LRV models, including our Type 6s. The project also includes replacing, as part of it, an obsolete lift, making the structural improvements to accommodate the new lift and replacing the 3 heavy-duty bridge cranes. So there's a lot of work, as you could probably tell by the different resolutions coming at you out at Ruby Junction. In late 2018, Stellar J's, the lift manufacturer who was going to supply it, they went bankrupt. it forced the contractor to identify a new lift manufacturer that could meet TriMet's needs unique for that building, of which there are very few domestic opportunities out there for suppliers. The additional contract authority here requested accounts for the increase in construction costs at Ruby, as they're necessary to improve the structure that can accommodate the increased weight and particularly the dimensions of the new lift from the supplier. This resolution before you, it seeks to increase the change order allowance by $550,000. It would then make the new total of the contract amount for $4.737 million in total. This fund, the dollar amount is being funded by an FDA grant from the Portland-Milwaukee Light Rail as part of a remnant of that remaining amount, knowing it had impact on, for the new board members, had an impact on Ruby Junction's ability to deliver service with those new cars. This is included in your FY21 capital program budget. And I will comment that Stellar J does use DBE contracts for about 6% of the work. And as with the prior contract discussed, we're going to work with Stellar J to see if there's ways to stretch that and get more out of it, the DBA relationships for other work. So there are limited choices on this. We're kind of trapped through the bankruptcy. And so this is an adjustment that's sitting before you to make. Your recommendation is requested.
Great. Questions, comments by the board?
Yeah, I had a question. Following up on the idea of stretching that inclusion goal, is it within the scope of this contract? Is it looking at other subcontracting opportunities within this, or more, or outside of this contract now, like for, you know, more inclusion practices down the road? I'm just curious in which way, if you know or aware, that we engage with subs in this manner, or primes.
I think Steve is speaking, but he's not being heard.
Oh, I don't.
Till Steve jumps in and corrects me, I think we're going to have limited alternatives for the actual manufacturer themselves. These are very skinny marketplace, but we would wrap it in with some of the other subs underneath that conversation. Ozzy would be my probably response to this.
Well, thank you. I mean, being an agency that has done well in working with primes in this manner, it's, I think, an interesting opportunity to hear what happens when there's room to improve, and what does that look like?
Yeah, this is a pretty captured market, this one, unfortunately. It's not where we are comfortable being. But it's the recommendation in front of you today is, I'm also concerned to not hold up the process, because there's all these cars are going to be arriving here shortly, and this one's we're a bit captured here. But so we try and leverage this through our other partners to the degree possible.
Other comments or questions? I think somebody's about ready to make a motion to approve resolution 20-10-42.
So moved, Linda.
Linda, okay. Is there a second?
Second.
That's Keith?
Yes.
All right, good. Good. Any further discussions or comments on this item? Again, we did get caught in this one.
Oh, yeah.
So again, good recovery. With that, I guess I'm going to call the question. All those in favor of the motion to approve resolution 20-10-42, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion is approved unanimously. Thank you. Mr. General Manager and Board, I look at the agenda. There are no ordinances on the agenda today, and I see nothing else to come before the board. Is there anything else that staff or the board believes should be on the agenda this morning?
I have nothing else.
Vote.
President Warner, I just
Vote.
a quick comment.
Okay.
I'm
Please.
sorry, I know people
Kathy.
probably want to leave after a long meeting, but my comment is really around providing some of the folks that are still continuing to use transit, especially in the colder months, with some resources. So this really, I think, goes back to Heather's testimony in the beginning of the board meeting where she talked about, you know, just treatment of our houseless folks or other people who might be, you know, also experiencing mental health crises. And I'm just looking outside at the colder weather, and, you know, people who are reliant on transit are still going to be using it. And I know that the counties are going to be opening up their warming shelters here pretty soon. So I would just encourage our folks on the ground to maybe have, you know, resources available for people who may be needing shelter. And I would recommend 211 Info as a really great resource to tap into. And it would be even be much better, I think, as a line of response if some of our, you know, fare collectors and other people can connect those people to resources. So that would be just my comment around some of the needs that I feel like we're going to be seeing with, again, increase in COVID, flu season, colder weather coming up, and how, you know, there are still going to be large parts of our community who are going to have to rely on transit.
I might just, yeah, no, thanks, Director Way. I think, so Sam DeSouza on the line, so we'll get him to send out a communication to the field supervisors, just as a friendly reminder, as we are at that time of year again. So thanks for the reminder. But I will also mention, as part of our standard operating procedures, we work pretty closely with all the municipalities in the region. And so we actually use our buses, some of our spare buses on cold nights. And we actually use them for sometimes a warming bus, transferring people to homeless shelters, or organized led by the municipality. So we play off their lead and we partner really closely with them. And I think the feedback we've received in the past has actually been really favorable. So, but I think your points are very well taken and a good reminder for all of us to be ready again. So thank you.
Thank you.
Director Edwards, was that you that wanted to comment also?
I was just saying, vote. If you haven't voted, vote.
Thank you. And thank goodness we only got another week before we have to have this finalized, right?
Commercials will be over, thank God.
I agree.
Bruce,
Yes.
Bruce, it's Linda. You know, I just wanted to make a comment. In the length of time that I have served as a board member, I just want to compliment TriMet for how they have expanded their community outreach in terms of getting feedback from just a really broad, comprehensive population, as opposed to when I first came on the board, we were limiting it to, you know, just a few agencies. And I just want to commend the staff and the management of TriMet for really embracing feedback from the community in everything that we do. So thank you so very much.
Good comment, Linda. Thank you. Anyone else? All right, before I adjourn the meeting, I just point out the notes at the bottom of the agenda. Our board retreat on November 29th, excuse me, on November 19th, 2020. It says to be determined. My understanding the time is now set from 1 to 4 for that date. So that's done. And then our December meeting is on December 9th, just to remind that for everybody. So unless there's anything else, Mr. General Manager, I'm hearing nothing from you.
No, I think I'm done.
All right. Thank you for the meeting. We had a meaty agenda of a lot of stuff. So thanks again to the staff for working with us and getting that information in a really good way for us to consume. So with that, I'm going to adjourn the business meeting and wish you all a good day. It's a beautiful day to be out in the golf course. I'm sorry, Linda. You need to get that thumb fixed. All right. I'm saying goodbye. Thank you all.
Thanks all.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.